long before the Erd Tree shattered and the demigods turned upon one another in a war that would consume the lands between. Mohg was born into a world that had already condemned him, his origins as an omen predating the shattering, and marking him as one of the oldest surviving demigods in a realm where most of his divine siblings would fall to madness, ambition, or the slow rot of time itself. What begins as the story of a cursed child, hidden beneath the capital in chains and darkness, transforms into something far more sinister and profound: the rise of a blood cult, the corruption of an Empyrean destined for godhood, and the establishment of a dynasty built upon forbidden rituals that would challenge the very foundations of the Golden Order. Mohg's tale is not simply one of a monster lurking in the shadows, but rather the chronicle of a rejected prince who would forge his own terrible divinity from the very curse that society used to cast him aside, who would reach into the outer dark beyond the Erd Tree's light and grasp powers that even his fellow demigods feared to touch, and who would orchestrate a plan so audacious and blasphemous that its success would have rewritten the fate of every living soul in the lands between. This is a story that spans the entire history of the age, from the golden days before the shattering, when Queen Marika's empire stood unchallenged, through the cataclysmic war that tore her children apart, to the rise of a blood-soaked underground kingdom where the rejected and the damned gathered to worship a new order built on suffering and transformation. It is a narrative woven through with threads of cosmic horror, as entities from beyond the stars whisper promises of power to those willing to listen, and it is a tragedy of brotherly love and divergent paths, as two twins born into identical damnation chose radically different responses to their fate. To understand how an omen child shackled in the sewers beneath Leyndell became the Lord of Blood, how he built the Mohgwyn dynasty in the hidden depths of the world, how he kidnapped his own half-brother and began a ritual to transform him into a vessel for his dark ambitions, and how his grand design ultimately brought him into conflict with a tarnished who would challenge his claim to the future itself, we have to go back to the very beginning, to the moment when Queen Marika the Eternal, ruler of the lands between and vessel of that Elden ring, gave birth to twin sons who bore the curse that her golden order deemed the most unforgivable of all afflictions. The omen curse, a condition that caused horns and malformed growths to sprout from the bodies of the afflicted, was seen as a stain upon the perfection that the Erd Tree represented, a throwback to the primordial chaos that existed before Marika's Age of Order, and while common omen were mutilated at birth and cast into lives of persecution and servitude, the omen born to royalty presented a unique problem for a regime built upon the appearance of divine perfection. Mohg and his twin brother Morgott entered a world that could neither acknowledge them nor dispose of them, for they carried the blood of gods, even as their bodies bore the marks of what the Golden Order considered demonic corruption, and so they were hidden away, imprisoned in the subterranean shunning grounds beneath the capital city, locked in the darkness among the pipes and the refuse and the forgotten, where they would spend their formative years surrounded by the literal and metaphorical waste of the civilization that their mother ruled. In those lightless depths, fed on neglect and the knowledge of their own rejection, the two brothers developed in parallel but ultimately divergent ways, both shaped by trauma but responding to it with opposite philosophies that would define their futures. Morgott, the elder twin, internalized the values of the Golden Order, even as it cast him out, developing a fierce loyalty to the Erd Tree and to his mother's empire, believing that his curse was indeed a shameful thing, and that his duty was to protect the system that despised him, to prove his worth through service and self denial. Mohg, however, looked upon his chains and his prison and the society that put him there, and felt not shame but rage, not a desire to prove himself worthy, but a burning need to tear down the order that had deemed him unworthy. And in that rage and that darkness, something else found him, something that whispered from beyond the boundaries of the world that Marika had shaped. The Formless Mother, an outer god associated with blood and wounds and the ecstatic suffering of the flesh, reached across the gulf between worlds and touched the imprisoned Omen Prince, offering him what the Golden Order never would: acceptance, power, and a purpose that did not require him to apologize for his existence. Where the Erd Tree's light had never reached him, the Formless Mother's presence filled the void, teaching him the secret arts of blood sorcery, showing him how to transform the very substance of life into a weapon and a sacrament, and whispering promises of a new age where the rejected and the cursed would rise to supplant those who had cast them down. Mohg embraced this dark patronage with the fervor of a true believer, not merely as a means to power, but as a genuine religious conversion. For the Formless Mother offered him something more valuable than strength. She offered him a framework in which his suffering and his curse were not flaws to be overcome, but sacred signs of his chosen status, marks of his communion with a power greater than the fading light of the Erd Tree. As the years passed, and the lands between entered the era of the Shattering, when Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring and her demigod children went to war over the fragments of its power, Mohg saw his opportunity not merely to escape his prison, but to build something new from the ruins of the old order. While his siblings fought over the great runes and the right to rule from Leyndell, while Morgott emerged from the shadows to defend the capital as its secret protector, Mohg descended even deeper into the earth, finding his way to a hidden realm soaked in blood, a place where the barrier between the lands between and the realm of the Formless Mother grew thin. There, in that crimson darkness, he established the Mohgwyn dynasty, not as a government in exile or a rival claim to the throne, but as the foundation of an entirely new order built upon principles antithetical to everything the Golden Order represented. He gathered followers from among the tarnished, the bloody fingers who would serve as his cult's militant arm, spreading his influence through assassination and the spilling of blood, each Detha in the age of the Erd Tree. Long before the Shattering would tear the lands between apart, a secret shame befell the Golden Order itself. Within the halls of Leyndell, the royal capital, Queen Marika the Eternal, sovereign of the lands between and vessel of the Elden Ring, gave birth to twin sons. But these were no ordinary heirs to the throne. Mohg and Morgott entered the world as omens, beings marked by grotesque horns that sprouted from their bodies and a curse that branded them as impure in the eyes of the Golden Order. The Omen curse was considered one of the most grievous afflictions in the lands between, a spiritual taint that manifested physically through twisted horns and malformed features. Those born with this curse were believed to be touched by primordial forces that predated the Erd Tree's dominion, chaotic energies that the Golden Order had sought to suppress and erase from the world. For common folk born as omens, the fate was brutal and immediate. Their horns would be excised in infancy, a cruel procedure that often proved fatal. Those who survived the mutilation faced lives of persecution, driven to the margins of society, or killed outright. But Mohg and Morgott were different. They were not commoners. They were the children of Queen Marika herself, born of her union with Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, the mighty warrior who had conquered the lands between and established the Golden Order's supremacy. This royal blood should have guaranteed them positions of honor and authority, seats among the demigod children who would shape the fate of the realm. Instead, their omen nature transformed them from princes into a liability, a living contradiction to everything the Golden Order represented. Queen Marika faced an impossible choice. The Golden Order she had established preached the supremacy of grace, the golden light of the Erd tree that blessed the worthy and elevated humanity above the chaos of the primordial age. The Order's entire foundation rested on the concept of purity, of divine right flowing from the greater will through the Elden Ring and into Marika herself. To acknowledge that her own children bore the omen curse would be to admit imperfection at the very heart of the Golden Order. It would raise questions about the legitimacy of her rule, about whether the greater will truly blessed her line, about whether the entire theological structure of the age was built on flawed foundations. The political ramifications would be catastrophic. The noble houses of Leyndell, the clergy who administered the Golden Order's teachings, the common people who had been taught to revile omens as abominations, all would see their faith shaken. So Marika made her decision. She would conceal their existence entirely. The twins would be hidden away, their births stricken from official record, their very existence denied. No announcement went forth from the capital. No celebrations marked their arrival. While other demigod children, like Godwyn the Golden, Marika's firstborn, were raised in splendor and groomed for greatness, Mohg and Morgott were erased from history before their story could even begin. Marika commanded that they be taken deep beneath Leyndell, down into the labyrinthine depths that few knew existed. There, in the subterranean shunning grounds, the twins would be imprisoned. The shunning grounds were a nightmare made manifest, a sprawling network of tunnels and chambers carved into the bedrock beneath the royal capital. This was where Leyndell disposed of everything it wished to forget. The architecture spoke of ancient construction, predating even the Erd tree's rise, suggesting these caverns had served as a dumping ground for unwanted things across multiple ages. The air hung thick with moisture and decay. Refuse from the capital above flowed through channels cut into the stone, creating rivers of filth that wound through the darkness. The walls wept with condensation, and strange growths flourished in the perpetual gloom. But the physical squalor was not the worst of it. The shunning grounds also served as a prison for other omens, those born to noble families who could afford to keep their cursed children alive, rather than having them killed outright. These omens were kept in cages, their horns intact, but their lives reduced to mere existence in the dark. Into this realm of despair, Mohg and Morgott were cast as infants. They were not simply imprisoned, they were abandoned to grow up in conditions that would break most souls. The twins had no nursemaids, no tutors, no gentle hands to guide them through childhood. They learned to survive in the filth and darkness, surrounded by the moans of other imprisoned omens and the constant reminder that they were considered too vile to exist in the light above. Food came irregularly, lowered down by guards who wanted no contact with the cursed beings below. The twins wore rags if they wore anything at all, and their bodies bore the marks of their harsh environment. Yet despite sharing the same curse and the same prison, despite being bound together by blood and suffering, the twins developed radically different responses to their circumstances. Morgott, even in his youth, clung to a paradoxical loyalty to the Golden Order that had rejected him. He internalized the teachings that filtered down even into the shunning grounds, the proclamations about the Erd Tree's glory and the righteousness of the Golden Order. Rather than rebelling against the system that imprisoned him, Morgott came to see his imprisonment as just. He believed that his omen nature truly was a curse, a flaw that made him unworthy of the grace others enjoyed. This self loathing transformed into a fierce dedication to proving his worth through service. If he could not be accepted for what he was, he would dedicate himself to protecting what he could never be part of. Morgott looked upward toward the distant light of Landel above and swore in his heart to defend the capital and the Erd Tree, even if they would never acknowledge his existence. His loyalty was the loyalty of the rejected child, who still desperately seeks a parent's approval, who believes that enough sacrifice might finally earn love. Mohg took a different path entirely. Where Morgott internalized shame, Mohg cultivated rage. He did not accept the Golden Order's judgment of his nature as just. He saw it for what it was: hypocrisy and cruelty dressed in divine language. His mother, the God Queen herself, had thrown him away like refuse. The order that preached grace and light had condemned him to darkness for the crime of being born. Mohg's resentment grew with each passing year in the shunning grounds, fed by every indignity, every moment of suffering, every reminder that he was considered unworthy of basic dignity. But unlike simple rebellion, Mohg's rejection of the Golden Order evolved into something more profound. He began to question not just his treatment, but the entire cosmological structure that justified it. If the Golden Order and its greater will deemed him cursed, perhaps the fault lay not with him, but with the order itself. This philosophical rebellion created a void in Mohg's worldview, a space where the Golden Order's teachings had once stood unchallenged. And into that void, something else began to seep. Deep in the darkness of the shunning grounds, surrounded by blood and suffering, Mohg became aware of a presence. It was not a voice at first, more a feeling, a sense of being observed by something vast and alien. The presence emanated from somewhere beyond the physical world, from a realm outside the greater will's dominion. This was the Formless Mother, an outer god whose nature was fundamentally opposed to everything the Golden Order represented. Outer gods were entities of immense power that existed beyond the lands between, cosmic forces that sought to exert their influence over the physical realm. The greater will, which empowered the Golden Order through the Elden Ring, was itself an outer god, though the Order's faithful rarely acknowledged this. Other outer gods represented different principles, different visions for how reality should be ordered. The Formless Mother was associated with blood, not as a mere substance, but as a fundamental force of life, transformation, and connection. Where the Golden Order sought to impose rigid hierarchies and pure categories, the Formless Mother embraced the messy reality of blood, which flowed through all living things regardless of status or grace. Blood was democratic in its way. It spilled from kings and beggars alike. It carried life and could cause death. It could be shared, mixed, transformed. The Formless Mother reached out to Mohg specifically because his suffering had prepared him to receive her influence. His omen blood, considered cursed by the Golden Order, was in fact a point of connection to older, wilder powers. His imprisonment in a place soaked with blood and anguish created ideal conditions for the Formless Mother's attention, and his desperate need for meaning, for power, for some way to transform his victimhood into agency made him receptive to her whispers. The communication was not verbal. The Formless Mother showed Mohg visions, images that burned themselves into his mind with the intensity of revelation. He saw a dynasty built not on grace and light, but on blood and devotion. He saw himself not as a cursed reject, but as a lord, a monarch of a new order that would embrace what the Golden Order rejected. These visions ignited something in Mohg's soul. He became fascinated with blood, studying it with the intensity of a scholar discovering a new field of knowledge. In the shunning grounds, blood was plentiful. It flowed from wounds, pooled in the chambers where omens were kept, mixed with the filth that ran through the channels. Mohg began to experiment in secret, conducting crude rituals in the darkest corners of his prison. He discovered that blood was not simply a passive substance, but could be manipulated, shaped, imbued with power through will and ritual. He learned to sense the life force within blood, to feel how it connected living beings to each other and to deeper currents of power. These experiments were dangerous and painful. Mohg had no teacher except the visions granted by the Formless Mother, no texts to guide him, no tools except what he could scavenge or fashion from the detritus of the shunning grounds. But with each ritual, his understanding deepened. He began to grasp that blood magic represented a path to power entirely separate from the grace of the Erd Tree. This was power that came not from above, not as a gift from distant gods to be bestowed or withdrawn at whim, but from within, from the fundamental essence of life itself. Blood magic was transgressive by its very nature, violating the Golden Order's categories and hierarchies. It treated the body not as a temple to be kept pure, but as a resource to be used, transformed, transcended. Mohg's experiments left marks on his body, scars and alterations that set him apart even from other omens. His horns, already a sign of his curse, began to take on new characteristics as his connection to the Formless Mother deepened. Mohg's experiments with blood and his communion with the Formless Mother did not go unnoticed. The whispers of his dark work began to spread through the hidden places of the lands between, reaching the ears of others who bore their own curses, their own reasons to reject the Golden Order's light. These were beings who had been cast out, marked by affliction or birth, deemed unworthy by the standards of Queen Marika's regime. They found in Mohg something they had never known under the Erd Tree's glow: acceptance, purpose, and the promise of power through their very suffering. One by one, those cursed souls made their way to Mohg's hidden sanctum, drawn by rumors of an omen lord who did not hide in shame, but instead embraced his nature as a source of strength. Among them were those afflicted with the omen curse like Mohg himself, their bodies twisted by horns and malformed growths, but also others bearing different marks of rejection. Some were tarnished, who had lost their grace. Others were descendants of those who had opposed the Golden Order in ages past. And still others were simply those who had been broken by a world that promised salvation, but delivered only hierarchy and exclusion. From these followers, Mohg began to shape something unprecedented in the lands between. A cult devoted entirely to the Formless Mother, an outer god whose very existence stood in opposition to the greater will that empowered the Erd Tree. This cult centered its worship around blood, viewing it not as a mere bodily fluid, but as the essence of life itself, the medium through which the Formless Mother's power flowed into the world. Blood became sacred to them, a substance that connected all living things and could be offered to their deity in exchange for her favor. Mohg taught his followers the rituals he had learned through his communion with the Formless Mother, rites that involved the letting of blood, the bathing in crimson pools, and the invocation of the outer god's name. These practices were anathema to the Golden Order, which venerated the golden light of the Erd tree above all else, and viewed blood magic as a corruption, a defilement of the natural order. Yet for Mohg's followers, these blood rites represented liberation from a system that had condemned them from birth. Morgott, who had chosen to serve the very order that had imprisoned him, could not remain ignorant of his twins' activities. Despite their shared confinement in the depths beneath Lindell, despite the walls that separated them, word reached Morgott of what Mohg was becoming. Perhaps it came through the whispers of guards, or through the subtle awareness that twins sometimes share, or through his own investigations, as he gradually earned a measure of trust from those who watched over the capital. Whatever the source, Morgott learned that his brother had not simply accepted their curse as he had, nor had Mohg chosen to prove himself worthy through service. Instead, Mohg had turned to something far darker, something that threatened everything Morgott believed the Golden Order could become if only it were defended properly. Morgott attempted to reach his brother, to dissuade him from this path that could only lead to destruction. He argued that their curse was a test, a burden to be borne with dignity, not a weapon to be wielded against the order that had shaped the world. He reminded Mohg of their mother, Queen Marika, and suggested that perhaps through loyalty and service, they might one day earn recognition, if not acceptance. But Mohg had moved beyond such hopes. He had tasted the Formless Mother's power and seen a different future, one where he would not beg for scraps of approval from those who despised his existence, but would instead forge his own kingdom built on the strength of the rejected and the damned. The cult continued to expand, despite, or perhaps because of, the danger inherent in joining it. Mohg proved to be a charismatic leader, his very presence radiating the conviction of one who had found purpose after a lifetime of purposelessness. He spoke to his followers of a new world order, one that would overturn the hierarchies of the Golden Order and elevate those who had been cast down. He promised that in his coming dynasty, the cursed would be blessed, the outcast would be welcomed, and power would flow to those willing to embrace the Formless Mother's gifts. This message resonated powerfully with those who had nothing left to lose. The cult drew in not only the obviously cursed, but also nobles who had fallen from grace, knights who had been dishonored, merchants who had been ruined, and scholars who had pursued forbidden knowledge. Each brought their own skills and resources to Mohg's cause, gradually transforming his following from a collection of desperate outcasts into something resembling an actual organization with structure, purpose, and growing influence. The Formless Mother, pleased with Mohg's devotion and the expansion of her worship in the lands between, granted him a gift that would mark him forever as her chosen champion. She bestowed upon him the power to manipulate blood itself, to command it as a sorcerer might command glintstone magic, or as a cleric might channel holy incantations. This was no mere parlor trick, but a fundamental alteration of Mohg's being, infusing him with the ability to draw blood from his enemies, to ignite it into cursed flames, to use it as both weapon and shield. The blood he spilled so it would not simply pool on the ground, but would answer to his will, rising up to strike at his foes, or forming barriers of crystallized crimson. More than this, Mohg gained the ability to curse others through blood, to mark them with the Formless Mother's blessing, and bind them to his will. This power came with a physical transformation as well. Mohg's appearance became even more fearsome. his horns growing longer and more elaborate, his eyes taking on a crimson glow that reflected the blood magic coursing through his veins. He was no longer simply an omen lord hiding in the shadows. He had become something new, a demigod in truth, empowered by an outer god and ready to claim his place in the world. With this power secured, Mohg made a declaration that would echo through the ages. He announced to his followers his intent to establish a new dynasty, the Mohgwyn dynasty, that would be ruled not by the golden light of the Erd tree, but by the sacred blood of the Formless Mother. This would not be a mere cult or a hidden society, but an actual kingdom with its own lands, its own laws, and its own succession. Mohg envisioned a realm where the omen curse was not a mark of shame, but a badge of honor, where blood worship would be the state religion, and where he would sit as lord and monarch. He spoke of finding a suitable consort who could help him birth this new age, someone whose blood was sufficiently powerful to mingle with his own and produce heirs worthy of the Mohgwyn name. This was an audacious claim, a direct challenge to the established order of the lands between where Queen Marika and her divine family had ruled unchallenged for ages. Yet Mohg spoke with such conviction, backed by such obvious power, that his followers believed him. They began to refer to him not simply as Mohg the Omen, but as Mohg, Lord of Blood, a title that captured both his nature and his ambition. News of Mohg's declaration reached Morgott, and it filled him with a complex mixture of emotions. Part of him felt a brother's concern, knowing that Mohg's ambitions would inevitably bring down the wrath of the Golden Order upon him. Part of him felt anger at what he saw as Mohg's betrayal of their shared heritage, his rejection of the possibility of redemption. But most of all, Morgott felt fear, not for himself but for Leyndell, the capital he had sworn to protect. He understood that if Mohg's cult continued to grow, if this Mohgwyn dynasty became a reality, it would represent an existential threat to everything the Golden Order stood for. Morgott strengthened his resolve, dedicating himself even more fervently to the defense of Leyndell and the principles it embodied. He trained harder, studied the arts of war and governance, and made himself indispensable to those who guarded the capital. In his mind, he was not simply serving the order that had imprisoned him, but protecting the world from the chaos that his brother threatened to unleash. The tragedy of Morgott's position was that he could not see, or would not allow himself to see, that the Golden Order's rejection of him and his brother had created the very threat he now fought to contain. Mohg's cult began to perform blood sacrifices, rituals that went beyond the simple bloodletting of their earlier practices. These sacrifices involved the ritual killing of captured enemies, of volunteers who gave their lives willingly to the Formless Mother's service, and sometimes of those deemed unworthy within the cult's own ranks. The blood from these sacrifices was collected in great vessels and used to consecrate weapons, to empower rituals, and to strengthen the connection between Mohg's followers and their outer god. These practices further solidified the cult's identity and bound its members together through shared transgression. In the eyes of the Golden Order, these blood sacrifices were abominations, proof that Mohg and his followers had abandoned all pretense of humanity. But within the cult, the sacrifices were viewed as sacred acts, necessary offerings to maintain the Formless Mother's favor and to fuel the coming transformation of the world. The blood of the sacrificed was said to carry their strength and their devotion forward, becoming part of the collective power that Mohg was accumulating for his dynasty. The conflicting ideologies of the twin brothers created a rift between them that grew wider with each passing year. Where once they had shared the bond of their curse, the understanding of two souls trapped in the same nightmare, now they stood on opposite sides of an unbridgeable divide. Mohg saw Morgoth as a traitor to his own nature, a slave who had internalized his chains and now defended the very system that had brutalized them both. Morgoth saw Mohg as a madman who had embraced corruption and would destroy the world in his quest for vengeance, disguised as ambition. Yet despite this ideological chasm, they remained bound by their shared curse, by the blood that ran in both their veins, by the memories of their imprisonment together. Neither could fully hate the other, and neither could fully let go of the brother he had once known. This tension between familial bond and ideological opposition would define their relationship for the rest of their lives, a tragic reminder that even the closest connections can be torn apart by the forces of belief and circumstance. Mohg's activities could not remain hidden forever. The Golden Order, through its network of spies and informants, began to piece together the truth about the blood cult growing in the shadows. Reports reached the authorities in Lendel of strange rituals, of missing persons who had joined Mohg's following, of blood-soaked altars discovered in hidden places. The Order recognized the threat for what it was, not merely a collection of malcontents, but an organized opposition backed by an outer god, led by one of Queen Marika's own sons, and growing in power with each passing day. Efforts were made to suppress the cult, to root out its members and destroy its gathering places. Knights were dispatched to hunt down known cultists, and laws were passed making blood worship a crime punishable by death. Yet these efforts met with limited success. Mohg had built his organization carefully, with cells that operated independently and members who were willing to die rather than betray their lord. For every cultist captured or killed, two more seemed to take their place, drawn by the very persecution that was meant to eliminate them. Morgoth found himself in an impossible position, torn between his loyalty to the Golden Order and his bond with Mohg. When the Order's forces moved against the blood cult, they were moving against his brother, his twin, the only other being in the world who truly understood what it meant to bear the Omen curse. Morgoth struggled to reconcile his duties with his feelings, to separate his role as defender of Lendel from his identity as Mohg's brother. He told himself that he was protecting Mohg as well, that by defending the Golden Order, he was preventing the total war that would surely come if Mohg's cult grew too powerful. He convinced himself that perhaps, if the cult could be contained, if Mohg could be isolated and his followers scattered, his brother might yet be saved from the path he had chosen. But deep down, Morgoth knew the truth. He and Mohg were on a collision course, and when they finally met again, it would not be as brothers, but as enemies, representing irreconcilable visions of the world. The era drew to a close with the twin brothers poised for greater conflict, their paths having diverged so completely that reconciliation seemed impossible. Mohg continued to build his power in the shadows, gathering followers, performing his blood rites, and laying the groundwork for his Mohgwyn dynasty. Morgoth continued his service to Lendel, proving his worth to the Golden Order and preparing for the day when he might be called upon to defend the capital against all threats, even those that came from his own blood. The shattering loomed on the horizon, though neither brother yet knew it. The world they had known, with all its cruelties and hierarchies, was about to break apart, and in that breaking, both Mohg and Morgoth would find their destinies waiting. In the wake of the Night of Black Knives and the death of Godwin the Golden, Queen Marika's grief and rage reached a breaking point. The Shattering era begins with an act of cosmic rebellion. Marika herself, the eternal vessel of the Elden Ring, took up her hammer and shattered the very ring she had been chosen to bear. The golden runes that comprised the Elden Ring, the fundamental laws governing reality in the lands between, scattered across the realm. This single act of divine defiance plunged the entire world into chaos. The greater will, the outer god that had granted the Golden Order its power, was silent. The Erd Tree, once radiant and welcoming, sealed its gates. The demigod children of Marika and Radagon, each claiming shards of the shattered ring for themselves, turned on one another in a brutal war of succession. Brother fought sister, alliances formed and dissolved, and the land itself began to warp under the weight of so many conflicting divine powers. The Golden Order, which had maintained rigid control over the lands between for an age, found its authority crumbling as quickly as the ring that had sustained it. For Mohg, imprisoned in the depths beneath Leyndell since birth, the shattering presented an opportunity that would never come again. The subterranean shunning grounds where he and his twin brother Morgott had languished for decades were not designed to withstand the upheaval that now gripped the capital. As the demigods waged war above, as soldiers deserted their posts to claim runes for themselves, as the very foundations of Leyndell trembled with the force of divine conflict, the chains that bound the Omen twins weakened. The guards who had watched over them for so long either fled or died in the chaos. The magical wards that reinforced their prison, powered by the authority of the Elden Ring itself, began to fail. Mohg, who had spent his entire life in darkness and chains, who had known nothing but the cruelty of his jailers and the revulsion of those who saw him as a cursed thing, finally saw his chance. Unlike his brother Morgott, who would eventually return to Leyndell out of a twisted sense of duty to the very order that had imprisoned him, Mohg had no such loyalty. He had been born an omen, marked by horns and a curse that the Golden Order deemed profane. He had been hidden away not for any crime he committed, but simply for existing. The Golden Order had given him nothing but suffering, and he owed it nothing in return. Mohg fled into the depths, moving through the labyrinthine passages of the subterranean shunning grounds with the desperate energy of one who knows he may never have another chance at freedom. He did not head toward the surface, toward the light of the Erd Tree that had never shone on him. Instead, he descended further into passages that even the most thorough jailers had never fully explored. The underground of the lands between is vast beyond measure, a mirror realm of rivers and ruins that predates the Erd Tree itself. Ancient civilizations had built their cities in these depths, worshipping stars and moons rather than the golden light above. Mohg made his way through forgotten catacombs and crumbling temples, past the remains of those who had been cast down long before the Golden Order even existed. He eventually emerged in the Seofra River region, a vast underground expanse where the ceiling glitters with false stars and ancient ruins dot the landscape like the bones of a dead god. Here, far from the reach of Leyndell's forces, far from the judgment of the Golden Order, Mohg found a kind of freedom he had never known. But freedom alone was not enough. Mohg had spent his life as a prisoner, powerless and despised. He had no intention of remaining a fugitive, hiding in the dark and hoping the world above would forget him. The shattering had shown him that power was the only currency that mattered in the lands between. The demigods who had once been siblings now tore at each other for scraps of the Elden Ring. The Golden Order that had proclaimed itself eternal and unchanging had collapsed almost overnight. If the gods themselves could fall, if the very laws of reality could be shattered and remade, then why should Mohg accept the station that birth had assigned him? He began to gather followers in the underground, and he found them more easily than he might have expected. The lands between were full of outcasts, those who had been cast down by the Golden Order for one reason or another. Omens like himself, born with horns and curses, hunted and killed or enslaved by those who served the Erdtree. Tarnished, who had been exiled from the realm and now returned to find no place for them. Albinorix, artificial life forms created by ancient sorcery, treated as less than human by the societies above. Sorcerers and heretics who had pursued knowledge the Golden Order deemed forbidden. All of them had been scorned by the Erdtree. All of them had reason to hate the order that had cast them out, and all of them were willing to follow someone who promised them power and purpose. Mohg offered both. He spoke of a new dynasty, one that would not bow to the Erdtree or the greater will. He promised that those who followed him would be elevated rather than cast down, that their curses would become blessings, that their blood would be sacred rather than profane. It was in these depths, as he gathered his followers and began to forge his dynasty, that Mohg encountered something that would change him forever. The underground of the lands between is not empty of divine influence. The greater will may claim dominion over the surface, but other outer gods have their own designs on the realm, and some of them dwell in the spaces between worlds, in the cracks and shadows where the Erdtree's light does not reach. Mohg discovered the Formless Mother, an outer god whose nature is blood itself. She is not a being with a fixed shape or form, but rather a presence, a consciousness that exists in blood and speaks through it. Where the greater will imposed order through law and light, the Formless Mother offered power through passion and pain. Her blessing came not through rigid commandments, but through ecstatic communion, through the spilling and sharing of blood. The exact nature of how Mohg first made contact with this entity is unclear. Some accounts suggest he stumbled upon an ancient shrine in the deepest parts of the Siofra River, a place where blood cultists from ages past had worshipped her. Others claim that the Formless Mother reached out to him, drawn by the intensity of his hatred for the Golden Order and his hunger for power. What is certain is that Mohg embraced her utterly and completely. The Formless Mother granted Mohg her blessing, and the transformation was profound. His omen curse, which the Golden Order had deemed a mark of shame, became a source of terrible power. The blood that flowed through his veins became a weapon and a sacrament. Mohg learned to manipulate blood itself, to draw it from his enemies, and use it to fuel devastating incantations. He could ignite blood in searing flames, could cause it to erupt from the ground in gouts of crimson fire, could mark his foes with a curse that would drain their life force and add it to his own. The horns that marked him as an omen grew larger and more elaborate, but now they were symbols of his divine patronage rather than marks of shame. He took on a new title to reflect his transformation. No longer was he simply Mohg the Omen, the cursed twin hidden beneath Leyndell. Now he was Mohg, Lord of Blood, chosen of the Formless Mother, and founder of a dynasty that would rival even the Golden Order itself. With his newfound power and the growing number of followers pledging themselves to his cause, Mohg established the seat of his dynasty deep within the Siofra River region. Mohgwyn Palace, as he named it, was built in a place even more remote and hidden than the underground river itself. The palace exists in a space that seems to fold reality, accessible only through hidden portways or through a blood soaked teleporter in the consecrated snowfield far to the north. The architecture of Mohgwyn Palace reflects its master's nature, where the Golden Order built with white stone and gold, celebrating light and purity. Mohg's palace is constructed from dark stone and decorated with crimson draperies. Blood flows through channels in the floors and walls, not as waste, but as a sacred element, constantly circulating through the structure, like the lifeblood of some vast organism. The palace is both a fortress and a temple, a place where Mohg's followers could gather to practice their profane rituals away from the judgment of the surface world. Those rituals became central to the Mohgwyn dynasty's practice and purpose. Mohg conducted elaborate ceremonies to honor the Formless Mother, rites that involved the spilling and sharing of blood among his followers. These were not mere symbolic gestures, but genuine acts of communion with an outer god. Through these blood rituals, Mohg's most devoted followers could receive a portion of the Formless Mother's blessing, gaining powers similar to their lord's own. The Sanguine nobles, as his elite followers came to be known, learned to wield blood incantations and fought with a fervor that bordered on ecstasy. The rituals also served a more practical purpose. Each ceremony strengthened Mohg's connection to the Formless Mother and expanded his power. The more blood that was spilled in her name, the more influence she could exert in the lands between, and the more power she could channel through her chosen vessel. Mohg was building not just a dynasty, but a new order entirely, one that would replace the Golden Order's rigid hierarchy with something more primal and passionate. As Mohg's power grew and his dynasty took shape, he became aware of the larger political landscape of the lands between. The shattering had scattered the demigods across the realm, each claiming territory and gathering forces. Mohg learned that his twin brother Morgott had not fled as he had. Instead, Morgott had returned to Leyndell and taken up the defense of the Erd Tree itself, adopting the name Margit, and later revealing himself as the true lord of the capital. Despite everything the Golden Order had done to them, despite the decades of imprisonment and the curse they both bore, Morgott remained loyal to the very system that had cast him down. To Mohg, this was incomprehensible and contemptible. Morgott represented everything Mohg had rejected, a willing slave who defended his own chains. The Mohgwyn dynasty, fueled by the insatiable thirst of the Formless Mother and Mohg's own twisted ambition, began its insidious expansion across the lands between. Its influence, a crimson stain spreading through the fractured realm, was not merely ideological but actively enforced. Mohg, ever the pragmatic visionary, understood the need for both recruitment and suppression. To that end, he created the Bloody Finger Hunters, a specialized cadre within his growing ranks. These weren't merely fanatical cultists, but skilled killers, often tarnished themselves, who had embraced the bloodflame. Their primary directive was to seek out and slaughter other tarnished, particularly those who showed signs of opposing Mohg's burgeoning power, or who simply served as convenient sacrifices for the Formless Mother. Eleonora, a once honorable tarnished who succumbed to the allure of the blood, became one of the most notorious of these hunters, her twin blade wreathed in the very blood flame that defined Mohg's magic. Her presence, and that of others like her, served as a stark warning: embrace the blood or be consumed by it. The dynasty's influence was not confined to the hidden depths of Mohgwyn Palace. Blood cults, mirroring the central tenets of Mohg's faith, began to appear in the more accessible regions of the lands between. These splinter groups, often led by charismatic but deranged individuals, would conduct their own macabre rituals, offering blood to the Formless Mother in hopes of receiving her favor, or simply to feel the intoxicating rush of forbidden power. Churches, once hallowed ground dedicated to the Golden Order, became sites of desecration. Their altars, once adorned with the symbols of the Erd tree, were defiled with grotesque blood sacrifices. Tombs, resting places of the revered dead, were likewise violated, their sanctity shattered as Mohg's followers extracted blood and bone for their unholy rites. These acts of profound sacrilege were not random outbursts of violence. They were calculated affronts to the established order, a deliberate tearing down of the old to make way for the new, a crimson dawn for the Mohgwyn dynasty. Each drop of blood spilled, each prayer whispered to the Formless Mother, further solidified Mohg's connection to his outer god, empowering him and deepening the corruption that permeated his followers. The very essence of Mohg's power, his mastery over bloodflame, was transformative. It wasn't merely a tool for destruction, but a means of creation, albeit a grotesque one. Through his dark rituals, steeped in the primordial current of the Formless Mother, he twisted and reshaped his most devoted followers. The bloody fingers, the foot soldiers of his cult, were not just ordinary warriors. They were individuals whose very bodies had been altered by the blood flame, granting them unnatural resilience and a thirst for blood that bordered on instinct. They were the shock troops of his expanding dominion, their attacks leaving lingering wounds that bled profusely, further fueling the Formless Mother's hunger. Even more disturbing were the bloody nobles, a higher echelon within the dynasty. These were individuals who had undergone even more profound transformations, their forms becoming more monstrous, their power more potent. They were the elite guard, the enforcers of Mohg's will, their aristocratic bearing twisted by the crimson corruption that flowed through their veins. These creations, born of blood and dark magic, were living testaments to Mohg's escalating power and the Formless Mother's insidious influence. Mohg's escalating aggression and the widespread atrocities committed by his followers could not go unnoticed indefinitely. The lands between, already fractured and scarred by the shattering, was a crucible of competing factions and desperate individuals. The growing threat of the Mohgwyn dynasty, with its open defiance of the Golden Order and its relentless pursuit of blood, inevitably drew the attention of the Tarnished. These exiled warriors, called back to the lands between by the guidance of grace, were driven by various motivations. Some sought to become Elden Lord, others sought power, and still others simply wished to end the suffering that plagued the land. Regardless of their individual quests, Mohg's dynasty represented a significant obstacle, a force of chaos that threatened to engulf what little stability remained. The tales of desecrated churches, of blood-drenched rituals, and of the terrifying power of bloodflame spread like wildfire, painting Mohg as a malevolent force that needed to be confronted. Among those drawn to Mohg, not as an enemy but as a savior, was White Mask Vara. A Tarnished himself, Vara was an early and ardent devotee of Mohg, recognizing in the Lord of Blood a path to true power and a rejection of the decaying Golden Order that had cast him aside. Vara, with his unnerving politeness and blood-soaked white mask, became one of Mohg's most loyal and effective agents. His role was crucial, to lure other Tarnished to the cause of the Mohgwyn dynasty. He would appear to newly arrived Tarnished, offering seemingly innocuous advice, subtly poisoning their minds against the Golden Order and planting seeds of doubt about the guidance of grace. His words, dripping with honeyed malice, would paint Mohg as the true savior, the one who offered a path to ascendancy, a way to transcend the limitations of their tarnished existence. His ultimate lure was the bloody finger, an item that allowed Tarnished to invade other worlds, not for glory or runes, but to spill blood in the name of the Formless Mother. Var's most significant contribution to the dynasty's expansion, however, was his distribution of the Bloody Invitation. This wasn't a formal document, but a blood-soaked rag, imbued with a fragment of Mohg's power that served as a direct conduit to Mohgwyn Palace. For those tarnished who had embraced the path of blood, who had proven their devotion through countless invasions and sacrifices, Vare offered this twisted pilgrimage. The invitation, once used, would transport the tarnished directly to the subterranean depths of Mohgwyn Palace, bypassing the treacherous journey through the consecrated snowfield and the hidden Miquella's halig tree. This was a masterstroke of recruitment, offering a direct path to the heart of Mohg's power, a shortcut for those deemed worthy. It was a testament to Mohg's growing confidence, his belief that his dynasty was on the cusp of true ascendancy, and that the tarnished, once brought into his fold, would become his most potent weapons. As the Mohgwyn dynasty solidified its power, the fear of Mohg's bloodflame magic became pervasive. This wasn't merely a flashy spell, it was a devastating force that drained the very life from his enemies. Unlike conventional fire, which burned and charred, bloodflame consumed from within, leaving its victims weakened, their vitality sapped, their very essence offered to the Formless Mother. Its crimson glow was a harbinger of death, a symbol of the agonizing demise that awaited those who stood against Mohg. This unique and terrifying magic, born from his communion with the outer god, was a powerful psychological weapon. It instilled dread in the hearts of his enemies, making them question the wisdom of confronting a force that could so effortlessly steal their life force. The spread of bloodflame, carried by his bloody fingers and bloody nobles, was a physical manifestation of the dynasty's expanding dominion, a constant reminder of Mohg's terrifying power. The expansion of the Mohgwyn dynasty, fueled by blood and ambition, posed an existential threat to the already crumbling remnants of the Golden Order. The Golden Order, once the dominant power in the lands between, was now a shadow of its former self, its authority fractured, its adherents scattered. Mohg's open defiance, his desecration of their sacred sites, and his direct challenge to their fundamental beliefs represented a direct assault on what little remained of their power. But the threat wasn't limited to the Golden Order. Other factions, each vying for power in the post-shattering landscape, also found themselves in Mohg's crosshairs. The Carrion royal family, the various knightly orders, even the nomadic merchants, all faced the prospect of being consumed by the crimson tide of the Mohgwyn dynasty. Mohg's ambition was not merely to carve out a niche for himself, it was to establish a new world order, one where the Formless Mother reigned supreme, and he, Mohg, Lord of Blood, would be her divine consort. At the heart of Mohg's grand design, the ultimate culmination of his fervent devotion and his unholy rituals, was the Bloody Bedchamber ritual. This was not merely a ceremony, but a profound act of spiritual and physical transformation intended to awaken Miquella, the Empyrean, as Mohg's god. Miquella, eternally youthful and slumbering in his cocoon, was the key to Mohg's ascension. Mohg believed that by drenching Miquella in the blood of the Formless Mother, By performing this ultimate act of sacrifice and communion, he could awaken Miquella in a new, corrupted form, a god beholden to Mohg and the outer god. In this twisted vision, Mohg saw himself as Miquella's divine consort, the one who would guide his new god to true power, ushering in an age of blood and glory for the Mohgwyn dynasty. Every sacrifice, every act of violence, every drop of blood spilled was a step towards this ultimate goal, a building block in the bloody bedchamber where Miquella would finally awaken. Mohg waited, patiently and expectantly, for the ritual's completion, for the moment his beloved Miquella would finally open his eyes and claim his destiny as the god of Mohg's new world. However, the relentless tide of the Tarnished, driven by their own quests and their desire to end the chaos, would eventually clash with Mohg's grand ambitions. The very Tarnished that Vara had sought to lure, the ones who had been drawn to the lands between by grace, would ultimately become the instruments of Mohg's downfall, whether through a thirst for power, a desire for vengeance for the desecrated lands, or simply a commitment to ending the tyranny of the outer gods. A powerful Tarnished would eventually make their way to Mohgwyn Palace. They would brave the treacherous path, navigate the blood-soaked catacombs, and finally confront Mohg, Lord of Blood, in his inner sanctum. The ensuing battle would be a cataclysmic clash of wills and powers, a testament to Mohg's formidable command of bloodflame and the Tarnished's unwavering resolve. In the end, despite his immense power, despite his devotion to the Formless Mother, Mohg would fall. The Tarnished, a lone warrior against a burgeoning dynasty, would slay Mohg, Lord of Blood, bringing an end to his reign of terror and temporarily halting the insidious spread of the Mohgwyn dynasty. His death, however, would leave a void, and the lingering influence of the Formless Mother would continue to cast a long, crimson shadow over the lands between, a testament to the enduring power of outer gods and the corrupting allure of forbidden blood. Following the cataclysmic events of the Shattering, a new power began to stir in the shadows, a power fueled by ambition and ancient, forbidden blood. We now arrive at the post-Shattering era, an age of the Erd Tree, where the stage is set for the rise of the Mohgwyn dynasty. As the lands between descended into chaos and the Golden Order struggled to maintain its fractured dominion, Mohg, one of Marika's Omen children, found himself exiled. Unlike his twin brother, Morgott, who chose to defend the Golden Order that reviled him, Mohg harbored no such loyalty. He was cast out, banished to the subterranean depths beneath the royal capital of Leyndell, a place where the unwanted and the cursed were typically relegated. It was in this desolate, lightless realm, far from the Golden Order's pervasive influence, that Mohg's destiny truly began to unfold. Beneath the very foundations of the Golden City, in the chilling embrace of the subterranean shunning grounds, Mohg, the Omen, made a profound and terrifying discovery. He encountered the Formless Mother, an outer god of blood. Now, an outer god in the world of Elden Ring is a cosmic entity, a powerful, often alien intelligence that exists beyond the comprehension of mortals and influences the lands between through its chosen vessels or champions. The Formless Mother, as her name suggests, lacks a defined physical form, manifesting instead as an unseen, insidious presence, her whispers reaching Mohg's mind, promising power and a new order. This encounter was not merely a chance meeting, it was a cosmic alignment, a convergence of a disenfranchised demigod and a primordial entity seeking a champion. Mohg, ever the opportunist and forever resentful of his Omen heritage and the Golden Order's rejection, readily pledged his allegiance to this newfound deity. He saw in the Formless Mother not merely a source of power, but a path to legitimate rule, a way to forge his own destiny, free from the constraints of the Erd Tree and its Golden Order. In return for his unwavering devotion, Mohg gained the Formless Mother's favor, and with it, the terrifying power of bloodflame. Bloodflame is a unique and potent form of magic, distinct from the Erd Tree's golden incantations or the arcane sorceries. It is a crimson, viscous fire born from the very essence of blood, capable of igniting foes and inflicting a debilitating status effect known as blood loss. This power was not merely a weapon, it was a symbol, a manifestation of the Formless Mother's influence, and a testament to Mohg's newfound connection to this ancient, sanguinary force. Empowered and emboldened, Mohg began to lay the groundwork for his own dominion. He established his nascent dynasty in the underground Siofra River region, a vast subterranean network of ancient ruins and ethereal wonders, far removed from the direct scrutiny of the Golden Order. The Siofra River, with its colossal ancestral spirits and shimmering celestial bodies, offered both seclusion and a strategic base from which to operate. It was a realm forgotten by many, a perfect crucible for Mohg's dark ambitions. Here he could cultivate his power, gather his followers, and prepare for the eventual overthrow of the existing order. The choice of location was deliberate. Mohg understood that to truly challenge the Erd Tree, he needed a sanctuary, a place where the Golden Order's light could not easily penetrate. As his influence grew, Mohg began gathering followers, individuals drawn to his charisma and the allure of his forbidden power. Among these were the Bloody Fingers, a distinct faction of tarnished invaders who had forsaken the traditional path of the Erd Tree and embraced the power of blood. The Bloody Fingers are notorious for their aggressive invasions of other players' worlds, seeking to spill blood and earn runes. But under Mohg, their purpose became grander. They were not merely raiders, they were apostles, proselytizers of the Mohgwyn dynasty, drawn to his promises of power through blood, a promise that resonated deeply with those who felt marginalized or overlooked by the prevailing order. These individuals, often outcasts themselves, found a new purpose, a new family, and a new god in Mohg and the Formless Mother. Their red fingers, stained by the blood of their victims, became a chilling emblem of their allegiance. To solidify his rule and create a true seat of power, Mohg constructed the Mohgwyn Palace. This grand fortress, hidden deep within the treacherous and often confusing depths of the Siofra River, is a testament to his ambition and the Formless Mother's influence. It is a sprawling Gothic edifice carved into the very rock of the underworld, adorned with grotesque statues and bathed in an eerie crimson light. The palace serves as both a sanctuary and a stronghold, a place where Mohg could conduct his rituals, house his followers, and prepare for his ultimate ascension. Its hidden location ensured its security, allowing Mohg to operate with a degree of impunity, far from the prying eyes of the Golden Order. The very air within the palace hums with the oppressive weight of blood and dark magic, a constant reminder of the Formless Mother's pervasive presence. Within the hallowed, or perhaps unhallowed halls of Mohgwyn Palace, Mohg initiated a series of gruesome blood rituals. These ceremonies were not mere acts of worship. They were practical applications of the Formless Mother's power, designed to empower both himself and his growing legion of followers. The blood of sacrifices, Often those foolish enough to wander into Mohg's domain, or those captured by his bloody fingers, was offered to the Formless Mother. This act of ritualistic bloodshed served a dual purpose. It strengthened Mohg's connection to his outer god, allowing him to channel more of her power, and it also imbued his followers with a fraction of that same sanguinary strength. The blood, imbued with the Formless Mother's essence, became a conduit, flowing through the veins of his adherents, granting them enhanced physical prowess and a deeper understanding of bloodflame magic. These rituals were a dark mirror to the Golden Order's communion with the Erd Tree, a perversion of divine connection. But for Mohg and his followers, they were the path to true power. It was during this period of consolidation and ritualistic empowerment that Mohg learned of Miquella, the Empyrean. An Empyrean is a being chosen by an outer god, destined to become a god themselves. Miquella, twin brother of Millennia, Blade of Miquella, possessed a unique and potent bloodline, a pure and unblemished lineage that held the potential for divine ascension. Miquella was an anomaly, a being of immense power and purity, but also afflicted by an eternal childhood and a curse of slumber. He resided within the Halig tree, a colossal, self-sustaining tree he had cultivated, designed to cure himself and his sister of their respective afflictions. Mohg, ever vigilant for sources of power that could further his own ambitions, recognized Miquella's immense potential. He understood that Miquella's pure blood, untouched by the various corruptions of the lands between, could be the key to his own godhood and the establishment of a truly dominant Mohgwyn dynasty. With this revelation, Mohg orchestrated one of the most audacious and impactful acts of the post-shattering era, the kidnapping of Miquella. From his slumbering cocoon within the Halig tree, a place thought to be impregnable, Mohg, likely aided by his bloody fingers and the insidious influence of the Formless Mother, abducted the Empyrean. The precise details of this abduction remain shrouded in mystery, a testament to Mohg's cunning and the effectiveness of his clandestine operations. It is widely believed that Mohg exploited Miquella's dormant state, perhaps using some form of blood magic or illusion to bypass the Halig tree's formidable defenses. This act was not merely a kidnapping. It was a declaration, a bold challenge to the established powers of the lands between, signaling Mohg's unwavering resolve to achieve his goals no matter the cost. Following the abduction, Mohg transported Miquella to the very heart of his domain, the Mohgwyn Palace. There, within the crimson-lit chambers, Miquella's cocoon was placed, a silent, vulnerable prize. Mohg's intention was clear. He would use Miquella's divine blood to ascend to godhood himself, bypassing the traditional paths and establishing a new dynasty, one founded on the principles of blood and the dominion of the Formless Mother. He believed that by drawing upon Miquella's pure Empyrean blood, he could elevate himself to a position of ultimate power, becoming the consort of an outer god and the progenitor of a new, blood-soaked age. This was the ultimate culmination of his ambition, the final steps in his grand design. With Miquella now captive, Mohg began his dark experiments, seeking to harness the divine properties of the Empyrean's blood for his own nefarious purposes. He did not simply intend to drain Miquella dry. Rather, he sought to cultivate and manipulate the blood, to understand its inherent power and integrate it into his own being. These experiments likely involved intricate blood rituals, infusions, and perhaps even attempts to commune with Miquella's consciousness, to bend his will to Mohg's own. The goal was not merely to steal power, but to become power, to fuse his omen essence with Miquella's divine purity, creating a new, terrifying entity worthy of ruling the lands between. The constant flow of blood from Miquella, though not fatal, was a continuous offering, a source of endless power for Mohg to draw upon. As Mohg pursued his ultimate goal, his bloody fingers expanded their influence across the lands between. They were not confined to the Seofra River. Their red-stained fingers and bloodflame attacks became a feared sight in various regions. They spread Mohg's teachings, a twisted gospel of blood and power, recruiting new followers from among the disillusioned, the downtrodden, and the ambitious. The bloody fingers served as Mohg's eyes and ears, gathering intelligence, eliminating rivals, and terrorizing those who opposed the nascent Mohgwyn dynasty. Their presence was a constant reminder of Mohg's growing power and the insidious reach of the Formless Mother. Through their actions, Mohg's influence began to seep into the very fabric of the lands between, preparing the way for his eventual emergence from the shadows. Indeed, Mohg's dynasty grew in power and notoriety, attracting a diverse array of outcasts and those utterly disillusioned with the crumbling Golden Order. Warriors, mages, and even some nobles, seeing the decay of the old regime and the promise of a new, powerful deity, flocked to Mohgwyn Palace. They were drawn by the allure of power, the promise of belonging, and the intoxicating freedom from the Golden Order's oppressive dogma. Mohg offered them a new purpose, a path to strength through blood, a stark contrast to the stagnant traditions of the Erdtree. His rise represented a genuine alternative, a dark beacon in a world consumed by civil war and despair. The Mohgwyn dynasty, born from exile and fueled by forbidden power, was no longer a mere cult. It was a burgeoning empire, poised to challenge the very foundations of the lands between. And as Mohg continued his macabre work with Miquella, the stage was being set for an even greater confrontation, a struggle for the very soul of the lands between. The Albinorics, a race of artificial humans created through sorcery, found themselves drawn to Mohg's burgeoning dynasty. These beings, often persecuted and considered lesser by the Golden Order, saw in Mohg a potential liberator, or at least a powerful patron. They became key allies, their unique physiology and inherent magical abilities proving invaluable. Many Albinorics, particularly the second-generation ones with their distinctive, pale, almost porcelain-like skin, served as laborers within the Mohgwyn dynasty mausoleum, toiling in the dimly lit chambers, preparing the sacrificial altars, and maintaining the intricate blood flow systems. Others, particularly the more robust, first-generation Albinorics, with their distinctively hunched forms and powerful limbs, were conscripted into Mohg's growing army. Their innate resistance to certain forms of magic and their fierce loyalty making them formidable warriors. They stood as a stark contrast to the Golden Order's rigid hierarchy, where their kind were often relegated to the lowest echelons of society, if not outright hunted. Mohg, in his twisted vision, offered them a place, a purpose, and a degree of power, albeit one steeped in blood and sacrifice. This alliance solidified his power base, providing him with a dedicated and often desperate workforce and fighting force, eager to prove their worth in a world that had long rejected them. As Mohg's influence expanded, his bloody fingers, a fanatical order of tarnished warriors who had pledged themselves to the Formless Mother and embraced the power of bloodflame, began to clash with the forces of the Golden Order. These skirmishes were not grand open-field battles, but rather brutal, often clandestine encounters in the labyrinthine underground regions of the lands between. The Golden Order, still reeling from the shattering and struggling to maintain control, viewed Mohg's burgeoning cult as a dangerous heresy, a direct affront to the Erd Tree and its established order. Their forces, often comprising heavily armored Landel knights and zealous Godric soldiers, sought to root out the bloody fingers wherever they found them, leading to bloody confrontations in the deepest caves, forgotten catacombs, and even within the ancient ruins of the eternal cities. These conflicts were characterized by the searing scarlet glow of bloodflame against the shimmering gold of the Erd Tree's grace, a stark visual representation of the ideological war being waged. The bloody fingers, fueled by the Formless Mother's power and Mohg's promises of a new age, fought with a savage ferocity, often employing guerrilla tactics and exploiting their knowledge of the underground passages to ambush and overwhelm their more conventionally trained opponents. These skirmishes, though localized, served as a constant drain on the Golden Order's resources and a testament to Mohg's growing defiance. A more insidious manifestation of Mohg's power began to take hold in the Siofra River. This ancient subterranean waterway, once a place of serene beauty and home to the ancestral spirits, started to undergo a horrifying transformation. Mohg, in his relentless pursuit of power and his devotion to the Formless Mother, began to corrupt its pristine waters, turning them a sickening viscous red with the blood of his sacrifices. The very essence of the river, once a symbol of life and natural flow, became a conduit for his dark rituals. The blood, infused with the power of the Formless Mother, seeped into the ecosystem, tainting the aquatic life and even the very stones of the riverbed. This was not merely a symbolic act, it was a physical manifestation of his dominion, a grotesque defilement of a sacred space. The ancestral spirits, once guardians of the river, were either driven away or corrupted themselves, their ethereal forms sometimes seen shimmering with an unsettling scarlet hue. The Siofra River, once a testament to the ancient beauty of the lands between, became a chilling testament to Mohg's malevolent influence, a crimson artery pumping the lifeblood of his dynasty through the underground. The once crystal clear currents, reflecting the starry sky of the underground, now swirled with a murky, unsettling crimson, a constant reminder of the horrific acts being committed in the name of the Formless Mother. The very air along the riverbanks grew heavy with the metallic tang of blood, a scent that clung to everything and everyone within its corrupted embrace. As Mohg's power grew, so too did the transformations among his followers. Those who embraced the power of bloodflame, who delved deepest into the rituals of the Formless Mother, began to undergo physical and spiritual changes. These were not mere cosmetic alterations, but fundamental shifts in their very being, a terrifying evolution spurred by the alien influence of the outer god. Their skin might become mottled and scarred, their eyes glow with an unnatural crimson light, and their limbs might elongate or twist into grotesque forms. The most devoted, the most deeply corrupted often developed a hardened, almost chitinous shell, their bodies becoming more resistant to conventional attacks, yet also more monstrous. They became less human, more akin to the grotesque creatures that served Mohg directly, their humanity slowly eroded by the constant influx of bloodflame. This transformation was seen by Mohg and his inner circle as a sign of favor, a blessing from the Formless Mother, a step towards a higher, albeit horrifying, form of existence. To the outside world, however, These mutated followers were terrifying harbingers of a dark future, their monstrous forms a chilling testament to the corrupting influence of the Mohgwyn dynasty. The transformation was often accompanied by a loss of individuality, their minds becoming increasingly subsumed by the collective will of the Formless Mother and Mohg, turning them into zealous, unthinking instruments of his ambition. Their voices, once human, would often deepen and rasp, their speech becoming guttural and infused with an unsettling reverence for their blood-soaked lord. In the midst of these escalating events, the Formless Mother, the outer god Mohg worshipped, began to grant him visions. These were not fleeting glimpses or vague prophecies, but vivid, immersive experiences of a future where he, Mohg, ruled as a god. These visions, often accompanied by a searing pain and an overwhelming sense of divine presence, reinforced his conviction and fueled his already boundless ambition. He saw himself upon a throne of blood, Miquella by his side, the lands between remade in the image of his Mohgwyn dynasty. These divine communications were the ultimate validation for Mohg, solidifying his belief that his path was righteous, his destiny ordained. The Formless Mother, an entity of pure, unadulterated blood and primordial chaos, whispered promises of unparalleled power and dominion, of a world cleansed by blood and reborn in her image. These visions were often accompanied by a sense of ecstasy, a profound connection to the cosmic, driving Mohg to intensify his efforts, to push the boundaries of his rituals, and to hasten the arrival of his promised godhood. He interpreted every success, every new follower, every drop of blood spilled in his name, as further proof of the Formless Mother's divine favor, emboldening him to pursue his ultimate goal with unwavering fanaticism. The visions were not just passive observations, they were often prescriptive, guiding Mohg in his rituals and his conquests, shaping his strategies and his understanding of the Formless Mother's will. Mohg's dynasty, fueled by these visions and his growing power, became a haven for those seeking power outside the established order of the Golden Order. Sorcerers, disillusioned with the rigid academic traditions of the Carian royal family, found a new patron in Mohg, a lord who embraced forbidden arts and offered avenues to power previously unimaginable. Heretics, those who questioned or outright rejected the dogma of the Erd Tree, flocked to Mohgwyn Palace, seeing in him a champion of defiance, a figure who dared to challenge the very foundations of the lands between. These individuals, often possessing unique knowledge or powerful unconventional abilities, further bolstered Mohg's influence and provided him with a diverse array of talents. They brought with them forbidden texts, ancient rituals, and dark magics that further enriched Mohg's understanding of the Formless Mother and enhanced his own bloodflame incantations. Mohg offered them not just sanctuary, but also opportunities for advancement and a chance to wield power that would have been denied to them elsewhere. This influx of varied talents and rebellious spirits created a vibrant, albeit terrifying, intellectual and magical hub within the Mohgwyn dynasty, a counterculture to the Golden Order's hegemony. The palace hummed with the energy of forbidden research and experimental rituals, a testament to the intellectual and magical ferment that Mohg fostered. With his power base solidified, his followers transformed, and his divine mandate confirmed, Mohg began to prepare for a grand ritual, one that would elevate him to godhood. The catalyst for this ultimate transformation was to be none other than Miquella's blood. Miquella, an Empyrean, a being chosen by the Two Fingers to potentially ascend to godhood, possessed a unique and potent lineage, a purity that Mohg believed would unlock the full power of the Formless Mother. Mohg's plan was not merely to sacrifice Miquella, but to use his very essence, his divine blood, to fuel his own ascension, to usurp Miquella's destined path and forge his own. This ritual was to be the culmination of all his efforts, the ultimate act of defiance against the Golden Order and the established cosmic order. The preparations were meticulous and extensive, involving the careful collection of Miquella's blood, the construction of elaborate altars within the deepest chambers of the Mohgwyn dynasty mausoleum, and the precise timing of celestial alignments. Every detail was planned with an obsessive focus, for the stakes were nothing less than the reshaping of the lands between and the birth of a new outer god. The ritual was to be a symphony of blood and power, a terrifying crescendo of his ambition, designed to tear open the fabric of reality and usher in the Age of Blood. The Mohgwyn Palace itself, once a grand, albeit forgotten structure, became a fortress of blood. Its ancient halls, originally built by a forgotten civilization, were now filled with the echoes of sacrifices and rituals. The very air within its walls thrummed with the raw energy of bloodflame, a constant, oppressive presence that permeated every stone and every shadow. The walls were often stained crimson, not just from the rituals, but from the very essence of the Formless Mother seeping into the structure. The palace became a living monument to Mohg's depravity, a place where the screams of the sacrificed mingled with the chants of his followers, where the scent of iron and burning flesh hung heavy in the air. It was a place of immense power, but also of profound horror, a testament to the lengths Mohg was willing to go to achieve his twisted vision. The architecture, once elegant, was now adorned with grotesque blood motifs, symbols of the Formless Mother, and effigies of mutated creatures. The deeper one ventured into the palace, the more unsettling it became, the more the line between the living and the dead, the human and the monstrous, blurred. The echoes of past rituals, the whispers of the Formless Mother, and the chilling presence of Mohg himself made the Mohgwyn Palace a truly terrifying place, a bastion of blood and ambition. To fuel his escalating rituals and to provide a continuous stream of sacrifices, Mohg's bloody fingers began to launch increasingly brazen raids on nearby settlements. These were not mere skirmishes, but targeted abductions, brutal incursions into the unsuspecting communities of the lands between. The bloody fingers, driven by fanaticism and the promise of power, would descend upon isolated villages, remote homesteads, and even small towns, capturing innocent individuals to be used in Mohg's blood rituals. These raids were swift and merciless, leaving behind a trail of destruction and terror. The captured individuals, often bound and gagged, were then dragged back to the Mohgwyn Palace, their fates sealed by the insatiable thirst of the Formless Mother. These acts of violence spread fear throughout the lands between, adding to the growing sense of unease and instability in the post-shattering era. The Golden Order, already struggling to maintain control, found itself increasingly unable to protect its citizens from these insidious attacks, further eroding its authority and legitimacy. The raids served a dual purpose. They provided the necessary blood for Mohg's rituals, and they instilled a pervasive fear that further isolated communities, making them more vulnerable to his influence. As Mohg's power grew and his dynasty solidified, whispers of his terrifying reign began to spread across the lands between. These were not just rumors, but chilling tales of blood rituals, monstrous transformations, and the insidious influence of the Formless Mother. The whispers reached the ears of both allies and enemies, drawing the attention of various factions and individuals. Some, disillusioned with the Golden Order or seeking a new source of power, saw in Mohg a potential ally, a force capable of challenging the established order. Others, particularly those loyal to the Erd Tree, viewed him as a grave threat, a burgeoning darkness that needed to be extinguished. The very mention of Mohgwyn dynasty, or Lord of Blood, evoked a mix of fear, fascination, and dread. The spread of these whispers marked a critical turning point as Mogg's hidden ambition began to emerge from the shadows, becoming a tangible force that could no longer be ignored. The lands between, already fractured and scarred, now had another formidable player on its stage, a Lord of Blood poised to plunge the realm into an even deeper abyss of chaos. The whispers were often embellished, growing in horror with each retelling, but the core truth remained. A new, terrifying power was rising in the depths, threatening to engulf everything in a tide of blood. And so, we arrive at the fourth major entry in our timeline, focusing on the dark genesis of Mohg's true power, a period we've titled The Blood Rituals. This era firmly takes root in the post-shattering period, specifically within the age of the Erd Tree, a time of profound upheaval and fractured authority across the lands between. Following the cataclysmic events of the Shattering, a period of unparalleled chaos and conflict that saw the Elden Ring shattered and its demigod shards scattered, Mohg, the Omen, found his opportunity. For what felt like an eternity, he had been a prisoner, confined beneath the golden boughs of Leyndell, the royal capital. His imprisonment was a direct consequence of his birthright, a cursed nature that manifested as the grotesque horns and scales characteristic of the Omens, a lineage reviled and ostracized by the Golden Order. Queen Marika, in her wisdom, or perhaps her cruelty, had decreed his confinement, along with his twin brother Morgott, ensuring that their accursed forms would not taint the purity of the Erd Tree's grace. But the Shattering, with its attendant civil strife and the weakening of the Golden Order's iron grip, provided the perfect cover. Amidst the pandemonium, the very foundations of Leyndell trembled, and in that moment of vulnerability, Mohg, with a cunning born of eons of resentment, broke free from his subterranean cell. His escape marked the true beginning of his dark ambitions, a trajectory that would forever alter the fate of the lands between. Freed from his shackles, Mohg ventured into the deepest, most forgotten corners of the lands between, a journey that speaks volumes of his innate drive and perhaps a premonition of his destiny. It was in these abyssal depths, far removed from the Erd Tree's fading light, that he made a discovery of cosmic horror and profound significance, the Formless Mother. This entity, an outer god, existed beyond the conventional understanding of deities in the lands between, a primordial force of blood and wounds, of raw, unbridled agony and ceaseless craving. Unlike the ordered and often benevolent outer gods associated with the Erd Tree, the Formless Mother reveled in disfigurement and the spilling of lifeblood, a stark contrast to the Golden Order's emphasis on purity and wholeness. Mohg, with his Omen heritage, his inherent otherness, and his rejection by the established order, proved to be a receptive vessel for this ancient malevolent power. The Formless Mother recognized in him a kindred spirit, a being capable of channeling her destructive will. She bestowed upon him her blessing, a dark covenant that transformed him, marking him as her chosen emissary, the prophet of a new, sanguinary age. This blessing wasn't merely symbolic, it imbued Mohg with the power of bloodflame, a terrifying crimson fire that burned not with heat, but with the very essence of lifeblood, capable of inflicting grievous wounds and corrupting all it touched. Empowered by the Formless Mother, Mohg wasted no time in establishing his dominion. He sought a location far removed from the prying eyes of the surface world, a place where his nascent dynasty could flourish unhindered. His gaze fell upon the subterranean Seofra River region, a vast, ancient network of caverns and ruins, illuminated by ethereal starlight, a world hidden beneath the earth. Here, amidst the remnants of a forgotten civilization, he founded the Mohgwyn dynasty. This wasn't merely a personal ambition, it was a grand vision, a new order built upon the principles of blood and sacrifice, designed to supplant the decaying Golden Order. To solidify his claim and provide a fitting seat for his burgeoning power, Mohg oversaw the construction of Mohgwyn Palace. This colossal edifice, carved into the very rock of the Seofra River, was a testament to his newfound might and his twisted aesthetic. Adorned with grotesque, blood-soaked altars and bathed in the eerie glow of bloodflame, the palace became a sanctuary for his followers and a chilling monument to his devotion to the Formless Mother. Its very existence was a secret, a whispered terror known only to a select few, hidden beneath the surface world, patiently awaiting its moment to rise. With his palace established and his divine mandate secured, Mohg began the macabre work of building his dynasty. His vision required a steady supply of victims, not for wanton slaughter, but for a higher, more ritualistic purpose. He initiated a campaign of abduction, targeting the vulnerable and the forgotten. Among his primary targets were the Albinaurics, a race of artificial humans, often ostracized and living in secluded communities. Their unique physiology, particularly their unalloyed blood, made them ideal subjects for Mohg's arcane experiments and rituals. But his abductions were not limited to the Albinaurics. Any being deemed suitable for sacrifice, any individual whose lifeblood could fuel his dark ambitions, was fair game. These abducted individuals were brought to Mohgwyn Palace, not as prisoners in the traditional sense, but as offerings destined for the elaborate blood rituals that formed the cornerstone of Mohg's worship. These rituals were not mere acts of brutality, they were intricate, sacred ceremonies designed to commune with the Formless Mother. Mohg, as her chosen vessel, presided over these gruesome rites, offering the lifeblood of his victims as a sacrament. The purpose was clear: to elevate his dynasty, to imbue it with the power of the outer god, and to hasten the arrival of a new age, an age of blood. Each sacrifice, each spilled drop, was believed to strengthen the bond between Mohg and the Formless Mother, drawing her power ever closer to the lands between. The palace itself, with its blood-soaked altars and the constant hum of dark magic, became a crucible for these rituals, a place where life was offered in exchange for power, where the very air thrummed with the anticipation of a bloody dawn. Mohg's influence extended beyond mere ritual. He sought to transform his followers, to imbue them with the same bloodlust and devotion that consumed him. His most fervent disciples, known as the Bloody Fingers, underwent a chilling metamorphosis. Through repeated exposure to the blood rituals, through the consumption of tainted blood, and through direct communion with Mohg's bloodflame, they became blood-obsessed fanatics. Their minds warped, their bodies often scarred and disfigured by the power they embraced. They became extensions of Mohg's will, utterly devoted to the Formless Mother and her prophet. They were his enforcers, his zealous agents, and his most terrifying weapon. The Bloody Fingers served a crucial role in Mohg's expanding dominion. They became his assassins, ranging across the lands between, hunting for new victims to fuel Mohg's insatiable rituals. Their methods were brutal, often leaving a trail of carnage and fear in their wake. They were not merely killers, they were harvesters, collecting the precious blood that Mohg required for his communion with the Formless Mother. Their relentless pursuit of victims ensured a constant flow of lifeblood into Mohgwyn Palace, sustaining his power and accelerating his dark ambitions. The mere mention of the Bloody Fingers would strike terror into the hearts of those who knew of their existence, a testament to their chilling effectiveness and the pervasive fear they instilled. As Mohg's power grew, so too did his influence over the very land around Mohgwyn Palace. The constant influx of bloodflame, the ceaseless rituals, and the pervasive presence of the Formless Mother's power began to corrupt the environment. The once pristine caverns of the Siofra River became tainted, the ethereal glow replaced by an eerie crimson haze. Bloodflame seeped into the earth, causing grotesque growths and unsettling transformations. The very air became heavy with the scent of iron and decay, a testament to the pervasive corruption emanating from Mohg's seat of power. This environmental degradation was not a side effect, but a manifestation of Mohg's growing power, a physical representation of his dynasty's insidious spread. The land itself was being reshaped in the image of the Formless Mother, a prelude to the blood-soaked world Mohg envisioned. It was during this period of consolidation and expansion that Mohg, through his dark communions, and perhaps through whispers carried on the blood-soaked winds, learned of Miquella's slumber. Miquella the Empyrean, a demigod of unparalleled beauty and grace, possessed an extraordinary power, a curse that kept him eternally young, and an unalloyed golden needle capable of warding off the influence of outer gods. He had retreated into the Halleck tree, a colossal living tree he had cultivated, seeking to cure his sister Millennia of the scarlet rot and to establish a haven for the unwanted and the downtrodden. Miquella's unalloyed nature, his purity, and his profound connection to the Erd tree made him an irresistible target for Mohg. The Formless Mother craved such a vessel, a being of immense power whose corruption would be a testament to her ultimate dominion. Mohg envisioned Miquella as his consort, a divine partner through whom he could establish a true dynasty, a lineage of blood and power that would forever bind the lands between to the Formless Mother. The abduction of Miquella became Mohg's ultimate goal, the culmination of his dark ambitions, a twisted desire to elevate himself and his outer god to the pinnacle of power, even if it meant defiling one of the most revered figures in the lands between. This audacious plan, born from the depths of his depravity and fueled by the Formless Mother's insatiable hunger, would set in motion a chain of events with catastrophic consequences. Picking up in the post-shattering era, with Mohg having successfully absconded with the slumbering Empyrean Miquella, our Lord of Blood wasted no time in establishing his new, unholy sanctuary deep within the subterranean reaches of the lands between. He brought Miquella's cocoon, still shimmering with the faint vestiges of the unalloyed gold's blessing, to the heart of Mohgwyn Palace, a sprawling cavernous domain carved from the very earth itself, bathed in an eternal eerie crimson glow. Here, amidst the flowing rivers of blood and the grotesque altars, Mohg began his most ambitious endeavor yet, to awaken Miquella and elevate him to godhood thereby securing his own position as the divine consort, the one true lord of the promised Mohgwyn dynasty. Mohg, in his fervent devotion, attempted to commune with Miquella. He believed with an almost delusional conviction that Miquella, as an Empyrean, possessed the innate potential to become a god, a vessel pure enough to receive the boundless power of the Formless Mother. His blood rituals, initially focused on establishing a direct link, were designed to penetrate Miquella's dreamlike slumber, to whisper promises of power and adoration into the Empyrean's mind. Mohg envisioned a symbiotic relationship. He would provide the power, the devotion, the blood, and Miquella would provide the divine spark, the legitimacy, the grace that would legitimize their unholy union and usher in a new age. However, Miquella remained unresponsive. The Empyrean's essence, imbued with the purity of the unalloyed gold and a profound resistance to external corruption, proved far more resilient than Mohg had anticipated. Miquella's slumber was not merely a passive state, it was a profound act of self-preservation, a shield against the very forces Mohg sought to impose upon him. The intricate web of Mohg's blood magic, potent as it was, found no purchase on Miquella's soul. The unalloyed gold, a substance of divine purity designed to counteract curses and afflictions, effectively repelled the Formless Mother's influence, leaving Mohg's incantations to dissipate harmlessly around the cocoon. This unresponsiveness, rather than deterring Mohg, only fueled his obsession. He interpreted Miquella's silence not as rejection, but as a challenge, a testament to the Empyrean's inherent divinity that required even greater effort to unlock. Undeterred, Mohg continued his rituals, escalating their intensity and depravity. Miquella's cocoon, once merely a prize, became the central focus of his communion with the Formless Mother. The cocoon, still housing the Empyrean's dormant form, acted as a conduit, amplifying Mohg's prayers and offerings to the outer god. The blood that flowed in Mohgwyn Palace, shed by countless victims, became a sacrament, a liquid prayer offered to the Formless Mother through Miquella's presence. Mohg believed that by saturating the environment around Miquella with the Formless Mother's power, he could slowly, inexorably, break down the Empyrean's resistance, preparing him for the ultimate transformation. The sheer volume of blood, the fervent devotion of his albinoric followers, and Mohg's own unwavering belief created a potent, if perverse, spiritual vortex centered around the cocoon. As Mohg deepened his communion, the Lord of Blood's own power grew exponentially. He harnessed the blood of countless victims, not just as offerings, but as a direct source of strength. The blood, infused with the Formless Mother's influence, became a tangible manifestation of his authority. His bloodflame magic, once a nascent ability, blossomed into a terrifying force, capable of incinerating foes and corrupting the very landscape. His trident, Mohgwyn's sacred spear, became an extension of his will, capable of summoning geysers of blood and inflicting the debilitating status effect of blood loss with every strike. The sheer scale of his sacrifices, the continuous flow of blood into the subterranean rivers, empowered him directly, making him a formidable opponent, a true demigod of blood and corruption. This burgeoning power and the aggressive expansion of Mohg's influence inevitably led to conflicts with other factions in the lands between. Mohg's bloody fingers, his elite cadre of assassins and enforcers, clashed frequently with the recusants of Volcano Manor, another group of assassins who pledged allegiance to Praetor Rykard and his blasphemous cause. While both factions shared a penchant for violence and a disdain for the Golden Order. Their ultimate goals diverged. The Bloody Fingers sought to usher in the Mohgwyn dynasty, while the Recusants aimed to devour the gods and usher in an age of primordial chaos. These clashes were brutal and frequent, often occurring in the shadows of the lands between, as both groups vied for influence, resources, and the right to spill blood in the name of their respective masters. These encounters were not always direct battles. Often, they involved intricate schemes, assassinations, and the manipulation of lesser factions, creating a complex web of intrigue and violence that further destabilized the already fractured realm. It was during this tumultuous period that the Tarnished, a warrior of destiny seeking to become Elden Lord, began to encounter Mohg's followers. These encounters served as early warnings of the Lord of Blood's growing threat. One such encounter involved Eleonora, a bloody finger hunter. Eleonora, a skilled warrior wielding a twin blade that inflicted devastating blood loss, would often ambush the Tarnished, seeking to test their mettle and perhaps to draw them into Mohg's service. These encounters, often initiated by Eleonora's sudden invasions of the Tarnished's world, were brutal tests of skill, forcing the Tarnished to adapt to the aggressive, blood-fueled combat style favored by Mohg's disciples. Eleonora's unwavering devotion to Mohg and her mastery of bloodflame arts provided a clear indication of the power and fanaticism that characterized the Lord of Blood's adherents. Mohg's increasingly brazen rituals and his attempts to corrupt an Empyrean did not go unnoticed by the cosmic powers that governed the lands between. The Two Fingers, the primary emissaries of the Greater Will, became acutely aware of Mohg's heresy. The Greater Will, through its two fingers, recognized the profound danger posed by Mohg's attempts to subvert an Empyrean and elevate an outer god. Miquella, as an Empyrean, was a chosen vessel of the Greater Will, destined to become a god and maintain the established order. Mohg's actions were a direct affront to this divine plan, a blasphemous attempt to hijack the very process of godhood. The Two Fingers, unable to directly intervene, began to subtly influence events, guiding certain individuals and factions to oppose Mohg, albeit indirectly. Their silent machinations aimed to disrupt Mohg's rituals and ultimately prevent the rise of the Mohgwyn dynasty, which they perceived as an existential threat to their dominion over the lands between. Eventually, the path of the Tarnished led them to the very doorstep of Mohgwyn Palace. Guided by whispers, fragments of information, and perhaps even the subtle nudges of the Two Fingers, the Tarnished invaded Mohgwyn Palace. The journey into Mohg's domain was a descent into madness, a harrowing trek through a landscape utterly saturated with blood and corruption. The Tarnished battled through hordes of Mohg's devoted bloody fingers, their bodies racked with blood loss and their minds consumed by fanaticism. They also faced the grotesque Albinoric worshippers, twisted and mutated creatures who offered their very lives as sacrifice to their blood-soaked lord. These Albinorics, once a persecuted race, had found a twisted form of salvation and purpose in Mohg's service, their loyalty absolute and their ferocity terrifying. The palace itself was a labyrinth of crimson passages, blood-stained altars, and the constant unsettling sound of dripping blood, all designed to disorient and intimidate any who dared to trespass. Finally, after navigating the treacherous depths of his blood-drenched sanctuary, the Tarnished confronted Mohg in the heart of his palace. The Lord of Blood stood before them, a towering figure wreathed in bloodflame, his imposing form radiating an aura of malevolent power. He wielded his formidable trident, Mugwin's sacred spear, with practiced ease, its prongs dripping with the essence of his outer god. His bloodflame magic danced around him, a vibrant, destructive display of his communion with the Formless Mother. The air crackled with anticipation, the weight of their impending clash palpable. Mohg, seeing the Tarnished as a final irritating obstacle to his glorious dynasty, met them with a chilling blend of contempt and fervent conviction, believing himself untouchable, protected by his outer god and the dormant Empyrean. During the ensuing battle, a cataclysmic clash of wills and power, Mohg underwent a terrifying transformation. As the Tarnished pressed their assault, pushing the Lord of Blood to his limits, Mohg, in a desperate bid to overwhelm his foe, tapped even deeper into the Formless Mother's power. His body began to contort, to shimmer with an unholy crimson light, merging further with the essence of his outer god. This transformation was not merely an increase in power, it was a profound physical and spiritual alteration, a grotesque apotheosis fueled by desperation and unwavering devotion. His attacks became more ferocious, his blood flame more potent, and his very presence seemed to warp the reality around him, turning the battlefield into a maelstrom of blood and fire. This second phase of the battle was a testament to Mohg's unyielding resolve and the sheer, unbridled power of the Formless Mother flowing through him. Yet despite his terrifying transformation and the immense power he wielded, the Tarnished ultimately prevailed. After a grueling and arduous struggle, the Tarnished defeated Mohg, striking down the Lord of Blood in his own blood-soaked palace. With Mohg's demise, his reign as the Lord of Blood came to an abrupt and decisive end. The Mohgwyn dynasty, a blasphemous vision of a new age ruled by blood and an outer god, was halted before it could ever truly begin. The rivers of blood in Mohgwyn Palace began to recede, the eerie crimson glow to dim, and the insidious influence of the Formless Mother, while not entirely eradicated, was severely weakened within the lands between. Mohg's death freed Miquella's cocoon from his direct, corrupting influence, though the Empyrean's fate remained shrouded in mystery, his slumber undisturbed, and his ultimate destiny still unfulfilled, awaiting a different kind of awakening. The lands between, momentarily spared from the horrors of the Mohgwyn dynasty, could now turn its attention to other equally pressing threats, as the Tarnished continued their arduous journey towards becoming Elden Lord. And so, we arrive at the fifth major entry in our timeline, marking a pivotal shift in the lands between, the period we term the Tarnished Era, coinciding with the ongoing usage of the Erd Tree. This era, following directly from the intense and secretive blood rituals we previously discussed, is defined by the arrival of an external force, a catalyst that would shake the very foundations of Mohg's carefully constructed dominion. It is during this tumultuous time that the Tarnished, a lineage of warriors and champions, banished from the lands between long ago, now guided by the spectral fragments of the Shigrisunts of the Erd Tree, begins to return. Drawn by a faint, yet undeniable call emanating from the colossal golden tree itself, these exiled figures, including you the player, are thrust into a shattered realm teetering on the brink of utter collapse. Their purpose, initially vague, slowly coalesces around the ancient promise of becoming the Elden Lord. While the Tarnished embarks on this daunting quest, Mohg, Lord of Blood, remains steadfast in his clandestine devotion to the Formless Mother, an outer god of primordial blood and primordial chaos. His ambition, now more fervent than ever, is to ascend to true godhood, not through the conventional paths of the Golden Order or the Erd Tree, but through a bloody, visceral communion with his abhorrent deity. He envisions himself as the progenitor of a new dynasty, one born of blood and fire, replacing the fractured rule of Marika's demigods. His methods remain consistent, a continuous, escalating series of blood rituals, each one intended to deepen his connection to the Formless Mother and accelerate his own grotesque transformation. Mohg's base of operations, his unholy sanctuary, continues to be Mohgwyn Palace. This sprawling subterranean complex, a testament to his perverse vision, is meticulously hidden beneath the very fabric of the lands between. Its primary access point for those not initiated into his cult is a bloodied, spectral portal, a gateway of crimson energy found in the consecrated yet desolate, consecrated snowfield, a region shrouded in eternal winter and guarded by formidable foes. This portal, a testament to the Formless Mother's influence, shimmers with an unsettling crimson glow, beckoning the unwary into Mohg's dark embrace. Another, more direct, if equally perilous route exists through a teleporter, accessed via the quest line of a certain enigmatic character, which we will discuss shortly. As the Tarnished navigates the treacherous landscape of the lands between, they inevitably begin to encounter the insidious spread of Mohg's influence. His followers, known collectively as the Sanguine Nobles, and other devout members of the Mohgwyn dynasty, are not confined to the depths of his palace. They roam the surface world, often disguised or operating from hidden enclaves, actively spreading his blasphemous gospel, and more sinisterly, abducting victims for the escalating blood sacrifices demanded by their lord. These nobles, clad in their distinctive crimson and gold armor, are often encountered in areas of historical significance or places of profound suffering, as if drawn to the lingering echoes of pain and despair. They are not merely evangelists, they are agents of terror, their presence a harbinger of the gruesome fate awaiting their captives. It is during these early stages of the Tarnished's journey that a seemingly benevolent figure, Var, the white-faced Vars, first makes his appearance. This enigmatic character, initially encountered near the Chapel of Anticipation, presents himself as a guide, offering cryptic advice and path forward in the confusing landscape of the lands between. He subtly steers the Tarnished towards a particular course of action, one that ultimately leads them into the very heart of Mohgwyn's influence. Vari's true allegiance, initially obscured by his polite demeanor and seemingly helpful counsel, slowly unravels as he directs the Tarnished to Mohgwyn Palace. His motives are ambiguous at first glance. Is he offering a test of strength, a perverse initiation into a new order, or is he merely luring another potential sacrifice to his master? The answer, as it turns out, is a chilling blend of all three, revealing his unwavering devotion to Mohg's the Lord of Blood and his vision of a new, blood-soaked dynasty. Varus, a master manipulator, uses the Tarnished's ambition and desire for purpose against them, turning their quest into a tool for Mohg's own advancement. He provides the Tarnished with the means to invade other worlds, specifically to hunt down other Tarnished, a ritualistic act of bloodshed that serves to bless the Tarnished and, more importantly, to initiate them into the gruesome practices of Mohg's cult. As the Tarnished delves deeper into the machinations of Mohg's followers, they begin to uncover the truly horrific nature of the blood-soaked rituals. These are not mere symbolic acts. They are visceral, gruesome ceremonies designed to extract life force and imbue the participants with the power of the Formless Mother. Among the most infamous of these practices are the BACs, bloody fingers, a term referring both to the ritualistic defilement of a tarnished's hand and to the assassins who bear this mark. These individuals, consumed by Mohg's ideology, actively hunt down other tarnished, invading their worlds and engaging in brutal combat. The purpose of these bloody fingers is multifaceted. They serve as a means of acquiring fresh blood for Mohg's rituals, a method of weeding out the weak, and a way to spread terror and chaos across the lands between, further destabilizing the existing order. The act of becoming a bloody finger, facilitated by Vara, marks the Tarnished as a target for invasion by other such assassins, effectively drawing them deeper into Mohg's web of violence and sacrifice. The very act of engaging in these invasions, whether as an invader or a victim, serves to further the Formless Mother's influence, as each spilt drop of blood strengthens her connection to the physical world. Through these encounters and revelations, the Tarnished begins to piece together the chilling truth of Mohg's ultimate obsession. Miquella, the Unalloyed. Miquella, one of Marika's most enigmatic demigod children, renowned for his ethereal beauty and his ability to cure affliction, was tragically abducted from the sanctuary of the Hist's Halig tree. This colossal, self-sustaining tree, a testament to Miquella's benevolent power, was meant to be a haven for the downtrodden and the afflicted, a place of peace and healing. Mohg, however, saw Miquella not as a beacon of hope, but as a vessel, a divine catalyst for his own twisted ambitions. He recognized Miquella's inherent divinity, his unique status as an Empyrean, a being chosen by the greater will to potentially succeed Marika. This made Miquella an irresistible prize for Mohgs, a means to usurp the established order and usher in his own bloody dynasty. Within the darkest recesses of Mohgwyn Palace, the Tarnished eventually discovers Miquella, not in his radiant form, but encased within a grotesque, blood-soaked cocoon. This horrifying sight reveals the true extent of Mohg's depravity. He has been systematically draining Miquella's blood, not to kill him outright, but to harness his divine essence. Mohg believes that by continuously siphoning Miquella's blood, he can fuel his own ascension to godhood, transforming himself into a true consort for the Formless Mother. He envisions a new lineage, a dynasty born of this unholy union, with Miquella, albeit in a perverted and exploited state, as the unwilling progenitor. The cocoon itself pulses with a sickly crimson light, a testament to the immense power being forcibly extracted from the demigod within. It is a symbol of Mohg's ultimate ambition to birth a new world order, drenched in blood and ruled by his own monstrous will. As the Tarnished explores the vast and unsettling expanse of Mohgwyn Palace, they encounter the decaying grandeur of the Poet Dynasty Mausoleum. This ancient structure, now repurposed and defiled by Mohg's presence, hints at his grand ambitions. The mausoleum, with its intricate carvings and architectural echoes of a bygone era, was clearly intended for a powerful lineage, a dynasty of immense significance. Mohg's appropriation of this space, his transformation of it into a monument to his own bloody cult, reveals his desire to not merely challenge the Golden Order, but to utterly replace it. He seeks to establish a new dynasty, the Mohgwyn dynasty, that will eclipse the legacy of Marika and her demigod children. The remnants of the mausoleum, now stained with blood and echoing with the cries of the tormented, serve as a stark reminder of Mohg's audacious plan to rewrite the very history of the lands between, to supplant the golden lineage with one of crimson. The insidious reach of Mohg's influence extends far beyond the confines of his palace. It permeates the very fabric of the lands between, corrupting creatures and individuals alike. The Tarnished encounters chilling evidence of this pervasive corruption in various forms. For instance, the Bloody Crow, a grotesque variant of the common crow, is found in areas touched by Mohg's power. These creatures, their feathers matted with blood and their eyes glowing with an unnatural crimson light, are aggressive and relentless, serving as living manifestations of the Formless Mother's influence. Similarly, the fearsome bloodhound knights, once noble warriors, have been twisted and warped by Mohg's power. Their armor is stained with blood, and their movements are imbued with a savage, predatory grace, reflecting the corrupting touch of the Formless Mother. They are often found guarding strategic locations or hunting down those who oppose Mohg's will, their loyalty now irrevocably pledged to the Lord of Blood. These corrupted beings are not merely mindless drones, they are potent symbols of the pervasive and transformative power of Mohg's dark god. The Tarnished's journey through Mohg's domain inevitably leads to a confrontation with one of his most formidable agents, Eleonora, Violet Bloody Finger. Eleonora is not just another Bloody Finger. She is a high-ranking assassin, a skilled warrior who wields the distinctive Mohgwyn's sacred spear, also known as Eleonora's pole blade, with deadly precision. Her presence signifies the escalating threat posed by Mohg's cult and the direct challenge it presents to the Tarnished's quest. Eleonora embodies the fanaticism and brutal efficiency of Mohg's followers, her movements fluid and deadly, her attacks imbued with the power of the Formless Mother. Her encounter with the Tarnished is a test of strength, a brutal assessment of their resolve, and a stark reminder of the sacrifices demanded by the Lord of Blood. This battle is not merely a skirmish, it is a clash of ideologies, a confrontation between the fading light of the Erd Tree and the rising tide of blood. It is a pivotal moment that further solidifies the Tarnished's understanding of the depth and depravity of Mohg's ambitions and the sheer power of the forces arrayed against them. The fight against Eleonora is a brutal introduction to the true strength of Mohg's faithful and a grim foreshadowing of the horrors that await the Tarnished deeper within Mohgwyn Palace. This confrontation marks a significant escalation in the Tarnished's understanding of the forces at play, moving from vague encounters with cultists to a direct challenge from a named powerful agent of Mohg. It signifies the point of no return, where the Tarnished is fully immersed in the bloody struggle against the Mohgwyn dynasty. Mohg's ritual, a culmination of years spent cultivating the blood of the Formless Mother, now approached its zenith. Within the hallowed confines of Mohgwyn Palace, amidst the crimson glow of ever-flowing blood rivers, he prepared to fully ascend. His twisted ambition centered on Miquella, the slumbering Empyrean. Mohg believed that by intertwining his own omen blood with Miquella's divine essence, he could usurp the very concept of godhood, not merely becoming a lord, but a true outer god, a vessel for the Formless Mother's unfathomable power. This was not just about ruling a dynasty, it was about rewriting the cosmic order, establishing an entirely new pantheon with himself at its head, fueled by the purest, most potent blood. The very air in his inner sanctum thrummed with this impending blasphemy, a dark symphony of ambition and depravity. Meanwhile, the Tarnished, a warrior drawn by the whispers of power and the promise of a greater challenge, navigated the treacherous paths leading to Mohgwyn Palace. The journey itself was a descent into madness, a testament to Mogg's pervasive influence. The blood lakes, vast and shimmering, reflected the grotesque, twisted forms of Mogg's loyal servants, the sanguine nobles who patrolled the crimson shores. These nobles, once perhaps ordinary men and women, had been utterly transformed by their devotion to the Lord of Blood, their bodies adorned with blood soaked finery, and their minds consumed by a fervent, almost religious zeal for bloodshed. Beyond the lakes, the landscape grew increasingly bizarre, with petrified corpses impaled on jagged rock formations, their forms contorted in eternal agony, silent witnesses to Mugg's horrific experiments. You could almost smell the metallic tang of dried blood in the air, a constant reminder of the atrocities committed in the name of the Formless Mother. The palace itself, carved from the very rock of the subterranean realm, loomed like a monstrous, bleeding heart, its architecture a grotesque fusion of ancient stone and pulsating organic tissue. As the Tarnished ventured deeper, the sheer scale of Mohg's following became apparent. The Mohgwyn dynasty, far from being a mere cult, was a burgeoning empire of blood. Its ranks swelled not only with the sanguine nobles, but also with other, more disturbing converts. Among them were the omen killers, once sworn to hunt and eradicate the accursed omen, now twisted by Mohg's influence to serve the very beings they once sought to destroy. Their heavy, blood-stained armor and menacing axes were a chilling sight, a testament to Mohg's ability to corrupt and repurpose even the most rigid of ideologies. These omen killers, having embraced the bloodflame, now saw their former mission as a misguided folly, a rejection of true power. They believed Mohg offered them not just a place, but a purpose, a chance to transcend their own limitations through the sacrament of blood. This conversion was a profound victory for Mohg, signifying his growing reach and his ability to subvert established orders within the lands between. The palace was a hive of activity, with countless servants, cultists, and mutated creatures all dedicated to Mohg's dark vision, their chants and rituals echoing through the cavernous halls. Amidst the carnage and devotion, the Tarnished stumbled upon a peculiar artifact, the Lord of Blood's exaltation. This talisman, pulsating with a faint crimson energy, revealed a deeper truth about Mohg's followers. It was not merely fear or ambition that drove them, but a genuine, almost ecstatic fervor for bloodshed. The talisman's description spoke of how it enhances attack power when blood loss occurs in the vicinity, a direct reflection of the Mohgwyn dynasty's core tenet. For them, blood was not just a weapon or a sacrifice, but a source of power, a pathway to transcendence. Every wound inflicted, every drop spilled, was a prayer, a communion with the Formless Mother. This exaltation, this joyful embrace of violence, differentiated Mohg's followers from other factions in the lands between, marking them as truly dedicated to their blood-soaked deity. It was a chilling insight into the depths of their fanaticism, a stark contrast to the more pragmatic or defensive motivations of other groups. Mohg's connection to the Formless Mother, the outer god of blood and wounds, was not merely theoretical. It manifested in tangible, terrifying ways. His incantations, particularly Bloodboon and Bloodflame Talons, were direct gifts from this alien entity. Bloodboon allowed Mohg to summon a torrent of bloodflame, a crimson fire that not only burned, but also inflicted the debilitating blood loss status effect, a signature of the Formless Mother's power. This incantation was a testament to the direct communion Mohg had established with his patron deity, a conduit for her destructive will. Bloodflame talons, on the other hand, coated his claws in this same fiery blood, allowing him to rend and tear with devastating effect, leaving his enemies bleeding and burning. These abilities were not mere sorceries or incantations learned from a book. They were divine endowments, proof of the Formless Mother's favor and Mohg's status as her chosen prophet. Through these powers, Mohg demonstrated the raw, visceral might of his outer god, a power that bypassed conventional understanding and embraced the chaotic, destructive essence of blood itself. The Tarnished also gleaned fragments of information about Mohg's complex and deeply antagonistic relationship with his twin brother Morgott, the Omen King. Both were born Omen, cursed with horns and tails, reviled by the Golden Order. However, their paths diverged dramatically. Morgott, despite his curse, remained fiercely loyal to the Erd Tree and the Golden Order, dedicating his life to protecting the capital, Leyndell, from all threats. He saw his Omen heritage as a burden to be borne, a test of his unwavering devotion. Mohg, in contrast, embraced his Omen nature, viewing it not as a curse but as a mark of distinction, a sign of his unique connection to a power beyond the Golden Order. He resented Morgott's subservience, seeing it as a betrayal of their shared heritage and a denial of their true potential. Mohg believed that the Omen were meant for something greater, something beyond the confines of the Erd Tree's light. This rivalry was not just sibling squabbling, it was a fundamental clash of ideologies, a microcosm of the larger conflict between the old order and the emergent, blood-soaked ambition of Mohg. Morgott, in his steadfast defense of the Golden Order, stood as a direct repudiation of everything Mohg sought to achieve, making their conflict a deeply personal and ideologically charged one. As the Tarnished pressed onward, Mohg, ever vigilant, prepared for the inevitable confrontation. He was not one to be caught unawares. Reports from his sanguine nobles and the whispers of the Formless Mother herself would have alerted him to the Tarnished's relentless advance. He bolstered his defenses, not just with his loyal followers, but with potent blood magic. Runes of blood, glowing with an ominous light, were etched into the very foundations of his inner sanctum, designed to impede and weaken any intruder. He positioned his most fanatical sanguine nobles, their bodies already scarred by countless rituals, at strategic points, ready to sacrifice themselves for their lord. Mohg understood the nature of champions, having seen many fall before his power. He knew the Tarnished would be formidable, but he also believed in the absolute supremacy of his bloodflame and the unfathomable power of the Formless Mother. His preparations were not born of fear, but of a calculated confidence, a desire to make the Tarnished's final moments a testament to his overwhelming might. He intended to demonstrate, in no uncertain terms, the futility of opposing a god in the making. Finally, the moment arrived. The Tarnished stood before Mohg, Lord of Blood, within the cavernous, blood-soaked arena of his palace. The air crackled with anticipation, thick with the scent of iron and the low hum of ancient dark power. Mohg, a towering figure, adorned in his regal, blood-stained robes and wielding his iconic great spear, greeted the Tarnished with a chilling blend of condescension and fanaticism. He saw the Tarnished not as an equal, but as a final glorious sacrifice for his ascension. The battle was a maelstrom of bloodflame and steel. Mohg moved with surprising agility for his size, his great spear sweeping in wide, devastating arcs, each strike imbued with the power of the Formless Mother. He summoned geysers of bloodflame from the ground, creating hazardous zones that forced the Tarnished to constantly reposition. Then, at a critical juncture, Mohg unleashed his most infamous attack, the Nihil Blood Curse. With a guttural roar, he would chant, Nihil, 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 3 times, each utterance inflicting a debilitating curse that rapidly drained the Tarnished's health, a direct manifestation of the Formless Mother's malevolent influence. This attack was not just damage, it was a statement, a declaration of his absolute control over life and death through blood. It was a moment designed to break the will of his opponent, to show them the true horror of his power. As the battle raged, and the Tarnished pushed Mohg to his limits, the Lord of Blood unveiled his true, terrifying form. In his second phase, he tapped directly into Miquella's divine blood, still contained within the giant, pulsating cocoon behind him. This was not merely a power-up, it was a twisted, blasphemous transformation. Mohg's body contorted and swelled, his omen horns growing into massive bat-like wings, his skin taking on a deeper, more vibrant crimson hue. He became a monstrous, winged entity, a grotesque fusion of omen, human, and nascent god. This transformation was the physical manifestation of his twisted ascension, a horrifying glimpse into the future he envisioned for himself and the lands between. He moved with even greater ferocity, soaring through the air, raining down bloodflame, and striking with enhanced power. The arena itself seemed to weep blood, responding to his heightened state. This was Mohg's ultimate display of power, his final desperate bid to achieve godhood, a testament to his unyielding ambition and his complete devotion to the Formless Mother. Despite his monstrous power and the terrifying spectacle of his transformation, the Tarnished, through sheer determination and skill, ultimately defeated Mohg, Lord of Blood. The colossal omen fell, his monstrous form collapsing amidst the blood-soaked floor of his palace, his ambition extinguished. His defeat marked the end of his plans to become a god, a crushing blow to the Formless Mother's burgeoning influence in the lands between. With Mohg slain, the immediate threat to Miquella was removed. The giant cocoon, previously guarded by Mohg with such zealous fervor, was now accessible, its golden glow a stark contrast to the surrounding crimson. However, Miquella's fate remained uncertain. The cocoon, though no longer under Mohg's direct influence, still held the slumbering Empyrean, his awakening perhaps delayed or even irrevocably altered by Mohg's vile rituals. The mystery of Miquella's true state and the implications of his eventual awakening lingered, a new enigma for the Tarnished to ponder. With Mohg's demise, his blood-soaked dynasty crumbled. The fervent, fanatical followers of the Mohgwyn dynasty, deprived of their charismatic leader and the direct conduit to the Formless Mother, scattered. The sanguine nobles, their purpose lost, either fled or were cut down by the remaining forces of order, if any dared venture into the subterranean depths. The Omen Killers, their corruption exposed, likely reverted to their former, albeit twisted ways, or simply dissolved into the shadows. The elaborate blood rituals, once central to their existence, ceased, their altars now cold and barren. The grand vision of a blood-soaked empire, a new world order under the Formless Mother, evaporated like mist, leaving behind only the lingering stench of blood and despair. The lands between, though still scarred, had been spared from Mohg's terrifying reign. In the aftermath of Mohg's defeat, the Tarnished uncovered the tragic truth behind his desperate, violent bid for power. Mohg was an omen, born into a world that reviled him, cast out and imprisoned beneath the capital. His ambition, though monstrous, stemmed from a deep-seated desire for acceptance, for a place in the world where his omen curse was not a mark of shame, but a source of strength. The Formless Mother offered him that acceptance, that power, promising him a kingdom where he and his fellow omen would not only be tolerated, but revered. His actions, while horrific, were born from a profound sense of injustice and a desperate craving for belonging, however twisted. He sought not merely power, but vindication, a way to prove that his existence, and that of all omen, had meaning beyond their curse. His defeat left a void in the lands between's dark underbelly, a space where ambition and depravity had once festered. While the immediate threat was gone, the underlying issues of prejudice, the allure of forbidden power, and the tragic consequences of desperation remained, a somber reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the Golden Order. The legacy of Mohg, Lord of Blood, was a complex tapestry of ambition, suffering, and the corrupting influence of an outer god, a stark warning of what can happen when the marginalized are pushed to their breaking point. As the age of the Erd Tree continued its slow, agonizing decline, marked by the arrival of countless tarnished warriors to the lands between, one particular Lord of Blood, Mohg, was meticulously orchestrating his grand design. This period, known to some as the Tarnished Era, became the crucible for his ultimate ambition, to usurp the very concept of godhood. Mohg, having long since cast aside the Golden Order and embraced the forbidden power of the Formless Mother, had established his hidden dynasty. This was not a dynasty of lineage or tradition, but one forged in blood and ambition, nestled deep within the earth, beneath the very roots of the Erd Tree itself. His sanctuary, Mohgwyn Palace, was a testament to his perverse vision, a cavernous, blood-soaked realm secreted away from the prying eyes of the Golden Order and the fading light of the Erd Tree. Here he gathered his followers, the blood-cursed and the outcast, those who saw in his crimson banner a promise of power and a new world order. The most audacious and pivotal act in Mohg's scheme involved the abduction of Miquella, the Empyrean. Miquella, twin brother to Millennia, Blade of Miquella, was an individual of immense divine potential, an unalloyed being whose very existence challenged the Golden Order's tenets. Mohg, driven by his twisted reverence and insatiable desire for godhood, saw in Miquella not just a vessel, but a means to ignite a new, blood-soaked dynasty. He infiltrated the Halak Tree, the sanctuary Miquella had meticulously cultivated, a place of healing and growth, and forcibly removed the slumbering Empyrean from his sacred refuge. This act, an unspeakable violation, was the cornerstone of Mohg's ambition. He believed that by nurturing Miquella with his own accursed blood, he could hasten the Empyrean's awakening, transforming him into a vessel for a new god, a god of blood, with Mohg himself as consort and ruler. However, Mohg's rituals, far from accelerating Miquella's growth, had a profoundly detrimental effect. The divine blood of the Empyrean, meant to flourish, instead became stunted, trapped in an agonizing stasis. Miquella remained in a state of eternal slumber within his cocoon, his delicate form pale and lifeless, his growth arrested by the ceaseless, corrupting influence of Mohg's blood rituals. This tragic irony underscored the fundamental flaw in Mohg's plan, his inability to truly understand or nurture the divine power he so desperately coveted. He sought to force Miquella's transformation through brute force and forbidden magic, rather than allowing the Empyrean's natural, unalloyed growth. The cocoon, a symbol of transformation and emergence, became instead a prison, a testament to Mohg's destructive ambition. Crucial to Mohg's ascendancy was his unholy alliance with the Formless Mother, an outer god of blood. This enigmatic entity, whose very nature is defined by formlessness and the primal urge of blood, granted Mohg immense power. Through this pact, Mohg gained access to bloodflame magic, a searing crimson fire that burned with the very essence of life itself. This magic was not merely destructive. It allowed Mohg to manipulate life essence, to draw strength from the blood of others, and to imbue his attacks with a terrifying parasitic quality. The Formless Mother, in her inscrutable wisdom, saw in Mohg a zealous devotee, a champion who could spread her influence across the lands between, transforming the very fabric of existence into a tapestry woven with blood. This alliance solidified Mohg's position as a truly formidable force, a harbinger of a new, terrifying era. It was into this blood-soaked theater that the Tarnished, guided by fate and the subtle machinations of others, inevitably stumbled. The path to Mohgwyn Palace was not easily found. It was a secret, guarded by illusions and hidden passages. Some Tarnished were led by the spectral form of white-faced Vara, a devoted follower of Mohg who sought to recruit new acolytes to the Lord of Blood's cause. Vare, with his cryptic pronouncements and sinister charm, would offer the Tarnished a chance to embrace the true path, a path of blood and power, leading them to the hidden teleporter in the consecrated snowfield. Others, perhaps more attuned to the echoes of ancient power, discovered the palace through the Seofra River, a subterranean realm steeped in history and forgotten lore where a portal lay concealed, a gateway to Mohg's dominion. Regardless of the route, the journey to Mohgwyn Palace was a descent into a world utterly alien to the surface, a world bathed in an eerie crimson glow. Upon entering Mohgwyn Palace, the Tarnished was immediately confronted by the horrifying reality of Mohg's domain. The halls were literally blood-soaked, the very ground slick with the viscous crimson fluid, a testament to the countless sacrifices and rituals performed within. The air hung heavy with the stench of iron and decay, a suffocating atmosphere that pressed down on the intruder. Here, the Tarnished encountered Mohg's Omenkin, grotesque beings born of the curse of the Omen, twisted and empowered by Mohg's bloodflame. These were not the docile omens found in the sewers of Landel. These were ferocious, blood-crazed warriors, their bodies scarred and their minds consumed by a fanatical devotion to their lord. Alongside them were Mohg's blood-crazed followers, human cultists who had willingly surrendered themselves to the Formless Mother's influence, their eyes gleaming with a manic fervor, their bodies adorned with crimson sigils. They were the foot soldiers of Mohg's dynasty, a terrifying reflection of his twisted vision. As the Tarnished delved deeper into the palace, they confronted Mohg's adopted dynasty of blood-tainted warriors and Albinorics. These were not merely servants, but Mohg's twisted court, a parody of a royal lineage. The blood-tainted warriors, often omens or other outcast beings, had been elevated by Mohg, granted a semblance of power and purpose within his dark kingdom. They wielded blood-flame weapons and fought with a savage, unyielding ferocity, their loyalty to Mohg absolute. Even more disturbing were the Albinorics, the artificial beings who had found a perverse sanctuary in Mohgwyn Palace. These were not the frail, docile Albinorics of the consecrated snowfield. These were twisted, empowered versions, their bodies often grotesquely altered by Mohg's rituals, their minds warped by his influence. They served as his loyal, if unsettling, retainers, a testament to his ability to corrupt and control even the most unexpected of beings. The Tarnished had to cut through these desperate, fanatical defenders, each encounter a grim reminder of the pervasive and corrupting influence of Mohg's power. Mohg, ever vigilant and attuned to the ebb and flow of life essence within his domain, sensed the Tarnished's relentless approach. He was not surprised. He had anticipated that some champion of the fading Erd tree would eventually seek to challenge his burgeoning dynasty. With a chilling calm, he prepared for battle within his throne room, a vast, cavernous space that served as the heart of his power. The air here shimmered with an accursed blood flame, its crimson light casting long, dancing shadows across the ancient stone. The throne itself, a grotesque mockery of royalty, was adorned with symbols of blood and sacrifice, a testament to Mohg's unholy ambition. He stood ready, his massive form radiating an aura of malevolent power, awaiting the inevitable confrontation. The Tarnished, having overcome countless obstacles and faced down Mohg's twisted court, finally entered Mohg's sanctum. The sight that greeted them was both horrifying and tragic. In the center of the vast chamber, suspended within a massive pulsating cocoon, was the Empyrean Michaela. His form was pale, almost translucent, utterly lifeless, a stark contrast to the vibrant, life-giving power he was meant to embody. The cocoon itself was a grotesque, organic prison, constantly dripping with a viscous crimson fluid, a testament to Mohg's ceaseless corrupting rituals. This was the ultimate prize, the heart of Mohg's ambition, and the Tarnished witnessed firsthand the tragic fate of the unalloyed Empyrean, a victim of Mohg's insatiable hunger for power. With the Tarnished now firmly in his presence, Mohg revealed his full, terrifying power. He was not merely a sorcerer, he was a warrior of immense strength and arcane might. He wielded bloodflame magic with effortless mastery, conjuring torrents of crimson fire that crackled with malevolent energy. In his grasp was his trident, the sacred relic sword, a weapon not of holy light, but of cursed energy, imbued with the very essence of the Formless Mother's blood flame. This was no ordinary weapon. It pulsed with a dark, predatory life, capable of inflicting grievous wounds and spreading the corrupting influence of blood flame. Mohg, in his full glory, was a vision of terrifying majesty, a demigod consumed by his own ambition, ready to unleash the full force of his unholy power. During the ensuing battle, a clash of wills and power that shook the very foundations of Mohgwyn Palace, Mohg unleashed his most infamous and terrifying attack, the Nihil chant. This was not merely a cry of battle, it was a cursed rite, a direct invocation of the Formless Mother's power. As Mohg uttered the chilling word, Nihil, 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 a wave of unseen energy emanated from him, draining the Tarnished's vitality, siphoning their very life essence to empower his blood flame attacks. This was a direct assault on the Tarnished's life force, a testament to Mohg's mastery over blood magic and his ability to weaponize the very concept of existence. The chant was a moment of pure terror, a chilling reminder of the Formless Mother's pervasive influence and Mohg's willingness to sacrifice anything, even the life of his opponent, to achieve his goals. Mohg further demonstrated his absolute mastery over blood magic throughout the brutal confrontation. He was not limited to close quarters combat. He could conjure flaming blood projectiles, bolts of searing crimson that tracked the Tarnished with relentless accuracy. These projectiles burned with the same accursed blood flame as his trident, inflicting both physical and magical damage. Even more devastating were his ability to create explosive geysers of cursed blood erupting from the very ground beneath the Tarnished's feet. These geysers were not merely explosions, they were bursts of raw, concentrated blood magic, capable of knocking the Tarnished off balance and inflicting massive damage. Each attack was a testament to his profound connection to the Formless Mother and his ability to manipulate the very essence of life into a weapon of destruction. The battle was a relentless barrage of bloodflame and cursed magic, pushing the Tarnished to their absolute limits as they sought to contend with the Lord of Blood's terrifying power. The Tarnished, a champion of no small renown by this point in the age of the Erd Tree, pressed their advantage, their relentless assault against Mohg proving too much for even a demigod. Mohg's defenses, once formidable and imbued with the very essence of the Formless Mother, began to buckle. The blood flame, which had so long served as his primary weapon and the source of his unholy power, flickered and waned under the Tarnished's sustained onslaught. This disruption was not merely physical, it was a spiritual severing, a weakening of the esoteric ties that bound Mohg to his outer god patron, the Formless Mother. Each parry, each dodge, each perfectly timed strike diminished his connection, draining the vitality from his blood flame incantations and rendering his fiery attacks less potent. The Formless Mother, an entity of pure, unadulterated agony and desire, had invested considerable power in Mohg, seeing him as her chosen vessel to manifest her will in the lands between. But now that connection was being frayed, stretched to its breaking point by the indomitable will of a single Tarnished. Sensing his imminent defeat, and in a final, desperate act of defiance and ambition, Mohg turned his full attention to the cocoon of Miquella. His intention was clear: to fully merge with Miquella's essence, to awaken the slumbering Empyrean, not as a benevolent, unalloyed gold god, but as a twisted, blood-soaked deity, a scion of the Formless Mother. This would have been the ultimate culmination of his grotesque ritual, a horrifying apotheosis that would have forever reshaped the destiny of the lands between. He would have sacrificed his own existence, his very being, to become one with Miquella, believing that through this unholy union he could ascend to true godhood, fulfilling the Formless Mother's dark prophecy. The air in the arena crackled with dark energy as Mohg began to channel his remaining strength into this final, desperate gambit. But the Tarnished, ever vigilant and unyielding, recognized the gravity of the moment. With a decisive blow, they struck Mohg down before the ritual could be completed, before the fusion of demigod and outer god could irrevocably alter the fate of Miquella. The dream of the Mohgwyn dynasty, the bloody empire he had envisioned, died with him. As the Tarnished's weapon found its mark, Mohg's physical form began to dissolve, not into dust or ash, but into a viscous crimson pool of cursed blood. This was no ordinary death. It was a visceral manifestation of the blood flame he had wielded, now turning inward, consuming him entirely. His reign of terror, a period marked by abduction, ritualistic sacrifice, and the insidious spread of his blood flame cult, was ended by the Tarnished's hand. The very substance that had been his power became his undoing, a testament to the corrupting influence of the Formless Mother. The pool of blood, shimmering with dark, unholy light, eventually seeped into the stone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of iron and decay.